If a tree falls and no one hears it, is it real? If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? This timeless philosophical question invites us to reconsider the very nature of reality. The question seems simple, but it holds profound implications for how we understand the world around us. If there is no one to observe something, can it still exist? And if it exists without observation, how do we know it is real? Before we dive deeper into this fascinating topic, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think reality exists without an observer, or is it just a construct of our perceptions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications if you're as fascinated by the mysteries of the universe as I am. There's plenty more to explore. At first glance, the idea of reality existing without someone to witness it might seem absurd. Of course, the tree makes a sound, right? It falls. It creates vibrations in the air, and those vibrations can be measured scientifically. But the question digs deeper than mere sound waves. It is asking whether the world we perceive would still exist if there were no one to observe it. This philosophical conundrum has been explored by many thinkers, from Immanuel Kant to modern-day quantum physicists. Kant, for example, proposed that our understanding of reality is shaped by our senses, and that we cannot know the thing in itself, the true nature of reality, only our perception of it. In his view, reality exists independently of us, but we are only able to understand it through the lens of our perception. So the question becomes, is there an objective reality out there? Or is everything we perceive simply a creation of our minds? To explore this question further, let's consider the concept of perception itself. Our senses, sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, are the filters through which we experience the world. But can we trust these senses to provide an accurate representation of reality? Neuroscience and psychology tell us that our brains often interpret sensory information in ways that can be misleading. For example, optical illusions trick our eyes into seeing something that isn't there, and our ears can mishear sounds. If our senses are prone to error, how can we be certain that what we perceive is an accurate representation of the world? Is our perception of reality truly reality, or is it simply a model our brain constructs based on limited information? Quantum mechanics adds another layer of complexity to this issue. At the quantum level, particles do not behave in the predictable ways that we expect from classical physics. In fact, quantum particles exist in multiple states at once, only collapsing into a single state when observed. This phenomenon is known as superposition. It's as if the act of observing or measuring reality is what causes it to take form. In quantum mechanics, the observer plays a central role in shaping reality, and this raises the intriguing possibility that our perception is not just passive, it may be an active participant in creating the world we experience. Take the famous double-slit experiment as an example. In this experiment, particles such as electrons or photons are fired at a screen with two slits. When no one is observing the particles, they act as waves, passing through both slits at once and creating an interference pattern on the screen. However, when a detector is placed to observe the particles, they behave like particles, passing through only one slit at a time. The very act of observation changes the behavior of the particles, suggesting that reality is not fully determined until it is observed. This concept challenges our conventional understanding of reality. We often think of the universe as something that exists independently of us, something that follows its own laws and operates whether or not we are watching. But quantum mechanics suggests that reality is not fixed, and that observation may play a key role in shaping the world around us. If the universe behaves differently depending on whether it is being observed, does that mean it doesn't exist in the same way when we are not looking? And if we, as conscious beings, are the ones observing, does this imply that reality exists in a more subjective way, shaped by our minds and perceptions? This brings us back to the question of the falling tree. If there is no one to observe the tree, does it still make a sound? If we adopt a purely scientific perspective, the answer would be yes. The tree falls, creates vibrations in the air, and those vibrations can be measured. But the philosophical perspective, particularly from the standpoint of idealism or solipsism, suggests that reality may only exist as we perceive it. Without an observer to perceive it, does the sound, or the event itself, truly exist? One way to think about this is by considering the relationship between the physical world and our subjective experience of it. We know that the physical world exists independently of our minds. Objects are tangible. They take up space and have mass, and they behave according to the laws of physics. But our experience of those objects is subjective. We don't experience the world directly. Rather, we experience it through our senses and our interpretation of sensory data. And this data is not always reliable. Our minds fill in the gaps, create meaning, and organize the chaos of sensory input into a coherent narrative. In this sense, reality may not be something that exists outside of us, but something that is created by our minds in response to the physical world. Consider the example of a tree in the forest again. If no one is around to hear it, the tree's fall might still make a sound in the sense that it creates vibrations in the air. But it is only when an observer is present, whether it as a human or a measuring instrument, that these vibrations are recognized as sound. In this way, reality is not something separate from us, but something that we co-create with the universe. Our perception of the world is essential to the existence of reality as we know it. This leads us to an even deeper question. If reality is shaped by our perception, how do we know what is real? If our senses are flawed and our minds are capable of distorting the world around us, can we ever be certain of anything? Can we trust our experience of reality? Or are we merely living in a subjective dream, constantly reshaping the world to fit our expectations and beliefs? The implications of these questions are profound. If reality is, in some sense, dependent on the observer, then we are not merely passive participants in the universe, we are active creators of it. This suggests that we have a greater influence on the world around us than we might have realized. The idea that our perception plays a central role in shaping reality challenges the traditional view that we are separate from the world, simply observing it from the outside. Instead, we are intricately connected to the world, helping to create the very reality we experience. In the end, the question of whether the tree makes a sound may not be as important as what it reveals about the nature of reality itself. It forces us to confront the limitations of our perception, the role of the observer in shaping the world, and the deep mystery of what is truly real. Whether or not the tree makes a sound when no one is there to hear it, we can be sure of one thing. Reality is not as simple as we once thought. It is a complex, ever-changing interaction between the world, our senses, and our consciousness. And the more we explore it, the more we realize that our perception is not just a window into the world, it is an essential part of the world itself. When time feels unreal, why reality feels like a dream. Imagine waking up, but instead of feeling grounded in your familiar surroundings, everything feels unfamiliar. The bed beneath you, the warmth of the sunlight, even the people you know and love, they all seem distant, foreign, as if they were figments of a much larger, elusive dream. What if the life you know, the thoughts you think, the conversations you have, the world outside your window, isn't as real as you've always believed? This may sound like the beginning of a strange dream itself, but it raises a crucial question. How do we know that what we call reality is truly real? Could it, in fact, be an elaborate illusion we've constructed in our minds? What if reality, the universe, the lives we live, are simply projections of our consciousness, like a dream that feels so vivid and tangible, only to fade away when we wake up? Every single day we engage with the world through our senses. Our eyes process light, our ears pick up sound, our skin feels warmth and cold, and our minds interpret all of these signals as real. But let's pause for a moment. What if those interpretations are the only real thing? What if everything we experience isn't out there at all, but is simply happening in our minds? When we dream, we experience an entire world, complete with emotions, sensations, and memories, yet none of it exists in physical space. Could our waking world be the same way, only more persistent? Philosophers and scientists have grappled with this idea for centuries. Descartes, a thinker who famously doubted everything except his own existence, once declared, "I think, therefore I am." His reasoning was simple. The very act of doubting, of thinking, was proof that he existed, that his consciousness was real. But Descartes, and others like him, were only exploring the nature of the mind and its relationship to the body. What if, in truth, even our consciousness is a mere construct, a layer of our perception, just like the characters and worlds we create in our dreams? It might seem absurd to think of reality as a dream, but there's a compelling argument. Consider this. In a lucid dream, you wake up to the fact that you're dreaming, and suddenly you can control your surroundings, alter time, and defy the laws of physics. But until that realization, the dream feels completely real. If consciousness can create such a convincing illusion during sleep, is it so far-fetched to believe that the waking world, this universe we navigate each day, might also be a dream in which we are unaware of our ability to shape it? We often think of dreams as fleeting, brief experiences that fade the moment we wake up. Yet in those dreams, time bends and stretches. An hour in the real world might feel like days, and in some instances, a few moments might span an entire lifetime. What if our waking perception of time operates on a similar illusion? Time in dreams isn't confined to the usual rules. It expands, contracts, loops. If time can be so fluid in dreams, could it be just as malleable in our waking lives? Quantum mechanics, one of the most mind-boggling areas of science, adds another layer to this mystery. At the quantum level, particles don't behave the way we expect them to. They exist in multiple states simultaneously, and only when observed do they collapse into one form. This phenomenon, known as superposition, challenges everything we know about the nature of reality. It suggests that the universe, at its most fundamental level, doesn't exist as solid objects, but as probabilities, ready to become real once observed. The very act of observation brings things into being. Could our perception, our consciousness, be the key to creating reality itself, just like a dreamer shapes their dream once they are aware they are dreaming? But let us step back for a moment. If this universe we live in is indeed a dream or a construct of our minds, how would we know? How could we separate the real from the illusion? Every moment we experience is felt so deeply: pain, joy, the mundane moments of daily life. These experiences are undeniably real to us in the moment. But when we dream, we also feel deeply. We encounter emotions, situations, people we know, and even pain that feels as real as anything we experience in our waking life. The mind can create entire worlds, entire histories, with nothing more than imagination. Could the world we call real be nothing more than an extended, uninterrupted dream? In lucid dreaming, the dreamer realizes they are dreaming and often takes control. But what if, just like in a lucid dream, we could wake up to the fact that our reality is a creation of our minds? What if, through some form of enlightenment or awareness, we could start to reshape the world around us in ways we never thought possible? There's another strange aspect to our perception of reality: the way time feels in a dream. It stretches and shrinks. Could the same thing be true for how we experience time in our waking lives? If time can bend in dreams, perhaps it bends in reality too. But we simply don't realize it because we're too entrenched in its rigid flow. Neuroscience has shown that our perception of time is not fixed. It is malleable, influenced by our focus and mental state. Could it be that we are in a waking dream, unaware of the elasticity of time, just as we are unaware of our power to manipulate our surroundings in lucid dreams? At the quantum level, particles exist in multiple states, waiting for observation to solidify them. Could it be that reality itself exists in a state of flux, only taking form when we observe it? This idea is deeply unsettling. It suggests that reality, at its core, is not as solid and predictable as we once believed. Instead, it may be more like a dream, an ongoing creation, only fixed when we choose to witness it? These questions are profound because they challenge everything we take for granted about the world. But perhaps, whether the universe is a dream or not, it doesn't change how we experience it. We still wake up, go to work, talk to friends, experience love and pain. But the idea that reality is not as solid as we assume opens up an exciting possibility. What if we have more influence over our lives and the world around us than we realize? In the end, we may never truly know whether we are living in a dream or in real reality. But the possibility invites us to embrace life with a renewed sense of wonder, to see the ordinary as extraordinary, and to challenge ourselves to wake up to the vast potential of our existence. After all, if we are dreaming, what would happen if we became aware of it? Is reality just an illusion? The truth behind what you see. We go through life, confidently believing that what we see is what's real. When we look at a tree, we know it's there. We feel the warmth of the sun, hear the wind rustling through the leaves, and touch the rough bark beneath our fingers. All of these experiences seem so undeniable, so real. But what if I told you that what we perceive as reality might not be what's really there at all? What if everything you've ever seen, felt, and experienced isn't exactly as it seems? What if reality is not a fixed, unchanging truth, but rather an illusion, a construct of our minds, shaped by our senses and experiences? Could it be that the world we live in is not the world as it actually is, but simply the world as we interpret it? Before we dive deeper into this, let's pause for a moment. Close your eyes and think about the last time you were absolutely certain of something. Maybe it was the taste of your favorite food, the sound of a friend's voice, or the sight of the sunset. You knew it was real, didn't you? But how do you know it was real? Did you experience it as it truly was? Or did your mind shape it into something familiar, something you were ready to accept as real? Our brains are constantly processing information from our senses: light, sound, touch, taste, and smell, and turning that information into a version of reality that we can understand. But our senses aren't perfect. In fact, they can be quite misleading. Have you ever looked at an optical illusion and seen something that wasn't really there? Or heard a sound that turned out to be something completely different than what you thought? These are examples of how our perception can fail us, leading us to believe in something that isn't actually true. The famous philosopher Immanuel Kant argued that what we experience as reality is not the world as it is, but the world as we perceive it. According to Kant, the mind plays a significant role in shaping our experience of reality. In his view, we cannot access the world directly. We only know it through the filter of our senses and the categories of thought our minds impose on it. This means that reality, as we know it, is not an objective, unchanging truth, but a mental construct shaped by our perception. What if the world around us is not really as it seems? What if the tree you see in front of you, the table you sit at, the air you breathe, none of it is truly out there in the way you experience it? Could it be that everything we perceive is just a projection of our minds, created from the sensory data our brains receive, molded into something we recognize as reality? Even science suggests that our perception of reality is far from accurate. For example, consider the way we see light. The human eye is only capable of seeing a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, what we call visible light. There's a vast range of electromagnetic radiation outside of what we can see: radio waves, microwaves, infrared, ultraviolet, and X-rays, yet we live our lives without ever perceiving them. Does that mean these forms of radiation don't exist? Of course not. They're just as real as the light we see, but they lie beyond the limits of our senses. In the same way, could there be aspects of reality that exist beyond our awareness, outside the reach of our perception? But even within the range of what we can perceive, things are not always as they seem. Optical illusions are a perfect example of how our brains interpret visual information in ways that can distort reality. We see objects that don't really exist, or we perceive sizes and shapes that are different from their true form. Our eyes are not always reliable. They filter and interpret what they see, and sometimes they can make mistakes. The same can be said for other senses. The sound of a bird chirping may seem clear to us, but our brain is only interpreting vibrations in the air. What if our brain could be interpreting those vibrations incorrectly? What if, when we hear something, we are not hearing it as it truly is, but as our mind has decided to understand it? And then there's consciousness itself. We experience the world subjectively, through the lens of our own minds. Our emotions, thoughts, memories, and experiences shape how we see the world. We may each perceive the same event differently, based on our unique backgrounds and experiences. Two people can look at the same sunset and have completely different emotional responses. One might find it peaceful, while the other feels sadness. Is either perception more real than the other, or do both represent a valid version of reality? The concept of quantum mechanics introduces another layer of complexity to this question. At the quantum level, particles do not exist in a fixed state until they are observed. They exist as a superposition, in multiple possible states, until a measurement is made, at which point they collapse into a definite state. This idea suggests that observation itself plays a crucial role in determining the nature of reality. In essence, the act of perceiving reality shapes what we experience. The famous double-slit experiment is one of the best-known demonstrations of this phenomenon. When particles, such as electrons or photons, are fired through a barrier with two slits, they create an interference pattern, like waves in water, when not being observed. However, when a detector is used to observe the particles, they behave like individual particles, passing through one slit or the other. This behavior suggests that particles know when they are being observed, and that their state depends on the act of measurement itself. This raises profound questions. If the act of observation can influence the behavior of particles, could it be that observation shapes the very fabric of reality? Could our perception not just interpret the world around us, but actively influence it? Is the universe truly objective, or is it subjective, molded by our minds and our perception of it? The implications of these ideas are mind-boggling. If reality is not a fixed, objective truth, but something shaped by our perception, then the world we experience is not the world as it is. It is the world as we perceive it to be. This idea challenges everything we know about the nature of reality and forces us to confront the possibility that what we see, hear, and feel may not be the ultimate truth of the universe. At the end of the day, the question of whether reality is an illusion or an objective truth may never be fully answered. But what if, instead of seeking a definitive answer, we embraced the mystery of it all? What if we accepted that reality might not be a simple, unchanging truth, but a complex interplay between the observer and the observed? The truth might be more fluid than we ever imagined, shaped by the perceptions of each of us in every moment. The power of last words, what final goodbyes really mean. Have you ever thought about the last words you'll say to someone? The last moment you'll share with a loved one? The final interaction before parting ways, perhaps forever? It's a sobering thought, yet one that carries profound weight. What if those last words are the only thing that remain after you're gone? What if, in those final moments, you're shaping the memory of your entire existence for those left behind? Our last words are often more significant than we realize. They may seem trivial in the moment, a fleeting expression of our thoughts, but they hold the power to linger far beyond the moment of utterance. The last thing we say can become a part of someone's memory, a part of their story, a part of their legacy. In fact, some might argue that our final words are the last part of ourselves that we truly own. Once we've said them, they belong to the person we've spoken them to, and they can be remembered, reinterpreted, or cherished long after we're gone. But what makes last words so powerful? Why do we give them so much meaning? Perhaps it's because in those final moments we feel the urgency of time running out. The weight of mortality presses in on us, and we want to make sure that whatever we say matters. We want to leave something behind, something that will endure. In the same way that we leave behind physical things, objects, memories, or legacies, our words become an intangible yet profound part of our legacy. Think about the last time you spoke to a close friend or family member. Did you say something that left an impression, something that carried weight? Or was it something more casual, easily forgotten? Perhaps it wasn't until later that you realized how much that moment really meant. Sometimes the words we speak aren't appreciated at the time, but in hindsight they take on new significance. It is often not until someone is no longer with us that we realize the true power of their words. This reflection on last words invites us to consider how we communicate with those we care about. Are we mindful of the impact our words may have? Do we take the time to express what's truly important, or do we allow the mundane to dominate our conversations? How often do we say goodbye only to realize too late that we didn't say the things that really mattered? Philosophers and writers have long reflected on the importance of words in shaping our reality. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, "Character is destiny." Our words are not just expressions of our thoughts, they are the vehicles through which we shape our character and influence the world around us. And in our final moments, the words we leave behind become the ultimate expression of that character. They carry the essence of who we were, what we valued, and what we hoped for the future. The weight of finality is what makes last words so powerful. It's not just about what is said, but the context in which it is said, the knowledge that this is the last time. The final goodbye is loaded with the kind of emotional energy that can make even the simplest words seem monumental. Imagine the last conversation you would have with someone you love. Would it be filled with regrets, with things left unsaid? Or would it be an expression of everything you've always wanted to communicate but never did? This concept extends beyond just our personal relationships. In literature, history, and pop culture, last words often carry enormous significance. Famous last words of historical figures like "Et tu, Brute" from Julius Caesar, or "I am about to die, but I am still alive" from Emily Dickinson, transcend the individuals themselves, becoming part of a larger narrative. These final utterances often gain meaning not because of their content, but because of the context in which they were spoken. In our daily lives, we may not have the grand spectacle of famous last words, but the truth remains. Every conversation, every parting, and every goodbye has weight. We might not always realize it in the moment, but each interaction with another person is a part of the puzzle that shapes their memory of us. What do we want that memory to be? Sometimes, the power of words comes not from what is said, but from what remains unspoken. The things we leave unsaid, the things we might wish we'd said, often linger long after a person is gone. There is a paradoxical truth in this. The silence around final words can carry just as much meaning as the words themselves. What we don't say may speak volumes about the emotions and feelings we leave behind. And yet, not every final goodbye is fraught with profound meaning. Sometimes our last words are simple, even trivial. But is it possible that, in the simplicity of those words, something deeper is being expressed, something beyond the surface level? Can the quiet goodbye, the everyday interaction, still have a lasting impact? Perhaps it's the seemingly small moments that, in hindsight, reveal the true depth of our relationships. In the end, last words are not just the final part of our conversations. They are the final expressions of our existence, the last imprint we leave on the world. They represent who we are in that final moment, and they often carry a weight that grows with time. What we say and how we say it can shape the way we are remembered, not only by those who hear us, but by the world at large. As we reflect on the power of last words, we are reminded of the importance of being present, of speaking with intention, and of ensuring that, in every conversation, we communicate what truly matters. For when the time comes to say our final goodbye, we want to be sure that our words, no matter how small or simple, carry the weight of our love, our character, and our truth. You are Stardust. Discovering your cosmic identity. Have you ever stopped to consider that the very atoms that make up your body, the cells, the tissue, the molecules, are the same atoms that formed the stars, the planets, and the vast expanse of the cosmos. You are made of stardust. Every part of you, from the iron in your blood to the calcium in your bones, traces its origin to the heart of a star. The idea that we are all connected to the universe at such a fundamental level is both humbling and awe-inspiring. When we look up at the night sky, we often feel small, insignificant in the face of the sprawling cosmos. The stars seem so distant, so far removed from our daily lives. But what if, instead of feeling disconnected from the universe, we recognize that we are, in fact, an integral part of it? The very material of our being was created in the fiery furnaces of stars that lived and died billions of years ago, exploding into supernovae and scattering the building blocks of life across the galaxy. We are not separate from the universe. We are a direct expression of it, a product of its cycles and rhythms. This realization is not just about our physical connection to the cosmos. It is also about our inner connection to the universe. Our consciousness, our thoughts, our desires, and our emotions, these too are part of the vast interconnected web of existence. We often think of ourselves as separate from the world around us, as individuals with our own experiences and perspectives. But in truth, we are deeply intertwined with the world, with each other, and with the universe as a whole. The concept of self-discovery is often tied to our quest for meaning in life. We spend our lives trying to understand who we are, what our purpose is, and how we fit into the grand scheme of things. Yet, in seeking to understand ourselves, we often forget the most fundamental truth. We are not isolated from the universe, but a reflection of it. Our lives, our experiences, and our identities are shaped by the same forces that shape the cosmos. From the Big Bang to the birth of galaxies, stars, and planets, everything that has happened in the universe has led to this moment. This moment in which you are alive, conscious, and aware. In the grand story of the universe, your life may seem small, but in the context of time and space, it is profound. You are the universe made conscious, able to reflect on itself, to explore its own depths, and to ask questions about the nature of existence. Your quest for self-discovery is not just about finding yourself in isolation, but about understanding your place within the larger cosmic narrative. One of the most beautiful things about this realization is that it challenges the notion of human separation from the universe. For centuries, we viewed ourselves as separate from nature, as beings who are apart from the world. But when we recognize that we are made from the same material as the stars, our understanding of ourselves begins to shift. We are not outsiders looking in. We are an intrinsic part of the universe, intimately connected to the very forces that govern the cosmos. This connection is not abstract. It is a real, tangible part of our being. This cosmic connection also invites us to think about our purpose in the universe. If we are made of stardust, what does that say about the meaning of our lives? Are we simply the product of random chance, or is there a deeper, more intentional force at work? For many, the idea that we are part of something much greater than ourselves is a source of comfort and wonder. It suggests that our lives, though fleeting, are part of a grand cosmic dance that has been unfolding for billions of years. Every moment, every breath, every decision is not just part of our personal journey. It is part of the universe's ongoing evolution. In our pursuit of personal growth, it's easy to get caught up in the idea that we must constantly strive to improve, to become something more than we are. But what if, instead of seeking to become something greater, we simply embraced our connection to the universe as it is? What if we recognized that we are already a manifestation of the universe's potential, that we are already deeply connected to everything that exists? True self-discovery, then, may not be about achieving some future state of being, but about recognizing and embracing our connection to the cosmos. It's about understanding that we are not separate from the universe, but a reflection of it. This insight can bring a profound sense of peace and belonging. When we see ourselves as part of something much larger than ourselves, the pressures of individual achievement and success begin to fade. Instead of feeling small and insignificant, we begin to feel a sense of wonder and awe at the sheer vastness of the universe and our role within it. This realization doesn't diminish our individuality. Rather, it enhances it. Recognizing our cosmic origins does not make us feel less special. It makes us feel more connected to the world, to others, and to the universe. We begin to see ourselves not as isolated beings, but as expressions of the universe's creative energy. Every thought, every action, and every emotion we experience is part of the cosmic flow, rippling through time and space, contributing to the ongoing evolution of the universe. In the end, the journey of self-discovery is not a solitary pursuit. It is an exploration of our place within the vast, interconnected web of existence. As we learn more about ourselves, we learn more about the universe. As we grow, the universe grows with us. We are not just exploring who we are, but what it means to be part of something far greater than ourselves. And in that realization, we find the true meaning of self-discovery, not as something separate, but as a part of the cosmos, unfolding alongside it, just as the stars once did. The youngest moment. How time silently changes us all. The youngest person alive today is only the youngest for a moment. Time moves forward, and with each passing second, someone else takes their place. As we age, we become more aware of the fleeting nature of youth. The moment we hold the title of youngest is brief, and before we know it, we too will have moved into the next phase of life. It's a reminder of how time is constantly shifting, and how, in the grand sweep of things, no one can hold on to youth forever. Youth is often associated with vitality, potential, and possibility. When we are young, the world seems full of opportunities, and the future stretches out before us like an open road. We believe we have all the time in the world to explore, to grow, and to achieve our dreams. But as we grow older, we begin to realize that time is not as infinite as we once thought. The days slip away, the years pass by, and suddenly we find ourselves looking back at the person we once were, wondering where the time went. But what if the passage of time is not something to fear, but something to embrace? As we age, we accumulate experiences, wisdom, and memories. We become more attuned to the rhythms of life and the inevitability of change. The beauty of life lies not in its permanence, but in its impermanence. The fact that time moves forward, that youth fades, is what makes life precious. If everything stayed the same, if we remained young forever, would we appreciate the fleeting moments the way we do now? There's a certain magic in youth. The energy, the excitement, the sense that anything is possible. But as we age, we gain something equally valuable, the ability to look back and see how far we've come.
We see the growth we've experienced, the lessons we've learned, and the relationships we've built. We begin to understand that youth is not just about the physical body, it's about the mindset we carry with us. The curiosity, the wonder, and the sense of possibility that youth represents can live on in us, no matter how many years pass.
It's easy to feel like time is slipping away, especially when we measure it in terms of years, milestones, and societal expectations. We look at the younger generation and think about all the things they have ahead of them, things we've already experienced or things we wish we'd done differently. But there's something important to remember. Time is not a race. The life we are living right now, at whatever age we are, is just as valuable as any moment that's passed or any moment still to come. Our journey is unique, and each stage of life offers something to learn and something to appreciate. Consider the youngest person alive at any given moment. They may be full of potential, but they are also caught in the same flow of time as everyone else. Just as they were once the youngest, someone else will take their place. Youth is fleeting, and so is every stage of life. We each experience the passage of time in our own way, but it's universal. It touches all of us. Aging is a natural process, and while it brings changes, it also brings the opportunity for deeper understanding, more meaningful connections, and the chance to contribute our wisdom to those who follow. Time is both a gift and a challenge. It reminds us of what we've done, what we haven't done, and what we still want to do. But it's also what drives us forward, what encourages us to keep going, to pursue new experiences, and to appreciate the moments we have. We may not be able to stop time, but we can make the most of the time we have. There's a beauty in growing older, in embracing the changes that come with time. Every wrinkle, every gray hair, every laugh line tells the story of a life well lived. It's a reminder that time has touched us, and that we've learned something along the way. The person we are today is not the person we were yesterday, and that is something to be proud of. Our journey is ongoing, and there's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to give. So while youth is fleeting, it is not something to mourn. Instead, we should celebrate it for what it is, a phase in life that gives us the energy to explore and the drive to dream. And as we move through life, we should hold on to that youthful energy in our hearts, no matter how many years pass. Time may change us, but it also makes us who we are. It gives us the opportunity to grow, to change, and to contribute our own piece to the puzzle of life. At the end of the day, we are all part of this ever-changing flow of time. We may be the youngest for a moment, but soon we will grow older and pass the title on to the next generation. But rather than fearing the passage of time, we should embrace it. Every stage of life brings its own challenges and rewards, and each one is equally valuable. The beauty of life lies not in its permanence, but in its impermanence. The fact that it is always changing, always moving forward. And in that movement, we find the true meaning of life. The ability to grow, to learn, and to leave our mark on the world. DéJà Vu explained, "Are you slipping into parallel realities? Have you ever experienced the sensation that you've lived a moment before, as though it's not the first time you've been in that exact place, seen that same face, or heard those words? It's a strange feeling, isn't it? You're standing there, in the present, but for a fleeting moment it feels as though time has looped, and you've stepped back into the past. This is déjà vu, a phenomenon so familiar yet so mysterious, and it raises an intriguing question. What if in those brief flashes of familiarity, we are catching a glimpse of something deeper, something that lies beyond the limits of our immediate reality? Déjà vu is an experience that happens to nearly everyone, at some point or another. It's the feeling of reliving an event, of knowing what's about to happen, even though logically, we know it's happening for the first time. It's a fleeting, almost dreamlike sensation, but it often lingers, leaving us wondering why we've felt it before and what it might mean. But what if this feeling is not just a trick of the mind? What if, in those brief moments, we are actually experiencing a parallel reality, a different version of events playing out simultaneously in another universe? The idea of parallel realities is a concept that has fascinated philosophers, scientists, and dreamers for centuries. If the universe is made up of infinite possibilities, is it possible that every decision we make creates an alternate version of ourselves, living a different life? According to the theory of multiverses, there may be countless versions of reality, each one slightly different from the next, with every choice leading to a new timeline, a new set of possibilities. Could déjà vu be the moment when we catch a glimpse of one of those alternate realities, a fleeting awareness that, in another universe, things have already unfolded differently? This concept of parallel realities is more than just a philosophical idea. It also has a basis in quantum physics. The famous many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that every time a decision is made, the universe splits, creating multiple realities. Each possible outcome of an event exists in its own parallel universe, each version of reality existing alongside the others. So, in this view, déjà vu might not be a mere trick of memory. It could be a brief encounter with an alternate version of ourselves, one that made different choices, one that followed a different path. But how does this fit with our everyday experience? When we have déjà vu, we often feel like we know what's going to happen next, like the current moment is simply a repetition of something we've already lived. Is it possible that we are actually experiencing a moment from an alternate version of our lives? Or is there another explanation for this strange phenomenon? One possibility is that déjà vu occurs when the brain processes information out of sync. Our memory system is complex. and sometimes new information gets misfiled in a way that makes it seem like a memory from the past. The brain might mistakenly interpret the present as the past because the situation feels so familiar, even though it is happening for the first time. This theory suggests that déjà vu is a trick of memory, a kind of cognitive glitch where our brain feels like it has seen something before, even though it hasn't. But what if the true nature of déjà vu goes beyond the workings of the brain? What if the sensation we experience is a reflection of something beyond our perception, a glimpse into another realm, another reality that exists just out of our reach? Perhaps in those moments, we are momentarily aware of a universe of infinite possibilities, where every choice we make creates a new timeline, a new version of reality. This idea of parallel realities is not just a speculative concept, it's something that has been taken seriously by physicists and cosmologists. The idea that there are countless universes, each one slightly different from the next, has been a topic of discussion within the realm of quantum mechanics for years. The many worlds theory, proposed by physicist Hugh Everett III in 1957, suggests that the universe is constantly splitting into multiple realities, each one representing a different outcome of every decision. If this theory is true, then it is possible that déjà vu occurs when our minds briefly tap into one of these alternate realities, when we experience a moment that has already happened in another version of our life. But does this mean that every time we experience déjà vu, we are actually glimpsing a parallel universe? It's hard to say for certain. There's still much we don't understand about the phenomenon, and while the theory of parallel realities is fascinating, it remains speculative. However, the very fact that déjà vu is such a common experience, one that so many of us encounter at various points in our lives, suggests that there may be something more to it than just a simple memory glitch. One of the most intriguing aspects of déjà vu is how personal and subjective it is. It's a deeply individual experience, and yet it connects us to something larger, something beyond ourselves. When we experience déjà vu, it's as though we're momentarily stepping outside the boundaries of our own lives, seeing the world from a perspective that feels both familiar and foreign at the same time. It's a fleeting moment of awareness, a glimpse into the unknown, a sensation that suggests the universe is far more mysterious and interconnected than we might ever fully understand. So, what does déjà vu really mean? Is it a simple trick of the mind, or is it a window into another reality? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between. Maybe in those moments when we experience déjà vu, we are not just remembering the past, we are glimpsing a future yet to come, or a reality that exists beyond our perception, waiting for us to unlock it. As we continue to explore the mysteries of time, memory, and perception, we may find that déjà vu is just one of many clues that point to the possibility of a deeper, more interconnected reality. Whether it as a brief moment of our own mind playing tricks on us or a fleeting awareness of the multiverse in which we exist, déjà vu serves as a reminder that reality is far more complex and mysterious than we could ever imagine. It's a phenomenon that challenges us to think about time, memory, and existence in new ways, and to wonder whether the world we see is the only one that exists. Do mirrors show the real you? The truth about self-image. We look into mirrors every day, catching glimpses of our reflections, our faces, our expressions, our appearance. It's such a common act that we hardly think about it. But what if I told you that the reflection you see in the mirror isn't truly you? It is just an image, a two-dimensional projection that doesn't capture the entirety of who you are. The mirror doesn't show your thoughts, your emotions, your essence. It only shows your external self, the image the world sees. So who are you really? Are you the person you see in the mirror, or is there more to you than just your physical appearance? The disconnect between how we perceive ourselves in a mirror and how we experience our true selves is more profound than we might initially think. Our identity isn't just about what we look like on the outside. It acts about how we feel inside, how we experience the world, and how we connect with others. The reflection in the mirror doesn't capture any of that. It's just a static image, a limited representation of something far more complex and dynamic. This raises an interesting philosophical question. What is identity? How do we define who we are, and is that definition shaped by the reflection we see in the mirror? In a way, we've been conditioned to believe that our physical appearance is a central part of our identity. We look in the mirror, see our outward features, and assume that is who we are. But is that truly the case? What if we are more than the sum of our physical parts, more than our face, our body, the way we dress, or the way we're perceived by others? The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once said that existence precedes essence. This means that we are not born with a fixed identity or purpose. We create ourselves through our actions and choices. Our identity is not determined by the image we see in the mirror, but by the way we live, the choices we make, and the way we engage with the world. What if, instead of defining ourselves by our outward appearance, we focused on defining ourselves by our inner experiences, our emotions, thoughts, and connections to others? What would that shift in perspective mean for how we understand who we are? Our reflections also tell us something about how we see ourselves. The mirror doesn't show us the whole truth. It's a limited perspective that only captures the surface level of our existence. It doesn't show our thoughts, our inner struggles, or the feelings that we sometimes don't even understand ourselves. It also doesn't show how others see us, because our reflections are viewed through our own lens, which is often clouded by our own insecurities, judgments, and self-perceptions. Consider how your reflection might change depending on your mood. When you're happy or confident, you might look at yourself and see someone with a positive, radiant energy. On the other hand, when you're feeling down or insecure, that same reflection can seem distorted, and you might focus on perceived flaws or imperfections. The mirror can lie to us, especially when we allow it to dictate how we feel about ourselves. Our perception of our reflection is often influenced by our emotions, thoughts, and even the standards of beauty set by society. But what if the real reflection is not what we see in the mirror, but the person we are on the inside? Our true selves can't be captured by a glass pane. It's not something visible or tangible. It's a combination of our values, thoughts, dreams, and interactions with the world. When we look in the mirror, we don't see our essence. We only see a fraction of who we are, and sometimes that fraction doesn't represent the full picture. This disconnect between self-perception and the external image also relates to how others see us. How many times have we looked in the mirror and wondered, is this how others see me? We often define ourselves in relation to others' perceptions, how we fit in, how we are judged, and how we measure up to societal standards. But, in doing so, we risk losing sight of our true selves, the person we are on the inside, far beyond the reflection we see in the mirror. In reality, our identity is shaped by much more than our appearance. It's shaped by our values, our experiences, and our relationships. We are not just the physical image reflected in the glass. We are the sum of our choices, emotions, and interactions with the world around us. And these elements, the ones that make us who we are, can't be measured by what we see in the mirror. So, if our true reflection isn't in the mirror, where is it? It's inside us, in the way we feel about ourselves, the actions we take, and how we choose to live each day. It's in the small moments that define us, how we treat others, how we handle challenges, and how we remain true to ourselves in a world that constantly tries to define us based on external standards. The next time you look in the mirror, ask yourself, who are you really? Are you the person staring back at you, or are you something more? You are not defined by what you see in the mirror, but by who you are beneath the surface, your heart, your mind, your soul. It's time to stop letting the reflection control how we define ourselves. We are much more than the sum of our parts, much more than what can be seen in a mirror. Our true identity is something far deeper, something that only we truly understand. Embrace that truth, and remember, the mirror is just a tool. It can show you your reflection, but it can never show you who you really are. The brain naming itself, a deep dive into consciousness. Have you ever thought about the fact that the brain is the only organ capable of naming itself? Think about that for a moment. The brain is not only responsible for controlling our thoughts, our actions, and our perceptions, but it is also the organ that allows us to reflect upon itself. The brain is aware of its own existence, capable of contemplating its own function, its own structure, and its role in shaping our lives. It is the seat of consciousness, the one part of our body that can study the very processes that create our reality. But in doing so, it creates a paradox. If the brain is responsible for our self-awareness, can we ever truly understand it fully? And if we can't fully understand the brain, can we truly understand who we are? This paradox is at the heart of the philosophy of consciousness. We often think of ourselves as self-aware, autonomous beings who control our actions, thoughts, and decisions. But when we dive deeper into the nature of self-awareness, we encounter the unsettling truth. The very mind that reflects upon itself may not be fully understood. Can we, as conscious beings, truly know ourselves if our understanding is limited by the very organ that creates our sense of self? Consider this. When you think about yourself, you are using your brain to form ideas, to recognize patterns, and to create meaning. You are constructing your identity, not just from what you experience in the world, but from the way your brain interprets those experiences. Your thoughts, emotions, memories, and actions are all products of the brain's activity. But how does the brain itself perceive what it is doing? Is it simply a passive observer of its own processes, or is it actively shaping the way we experience the world? The self-awareness we take for granted is, in many ways, a product of the brain's ability to reflect on itself. But what happens when that reflection becomes distorted or flawed? What happens when the brain misinterprets its own functions or is unable to process information accurately? This is where the paradox deepens. The brain, which is the organ that creates consciousness, is also subject to the limitations of consciousness itself. It can only understand what it is capable of understanding, and that understanding is shaped by the very processes it seeks to comprehend. Philosophers have long grappled with the nature of consciousness and self-awareness. René Descartes famously declared, "I think, therefore I am," arguing that the very act of thinking proves one's existence. In this view, consciousness is an undeniable proof of reality. But Descartes also faced a dilemma. If the brain is responsible for our consciousness, how can we trust its perceptions of itself? The brain creates our reality, but it is also part of that reality. The paradox lies in the fact that the brain, as a tool for self-reflection, may not be able to fully understand itself. Can it truly know the depths of consciousness when it is the source of that knowledge? Modern neuroscience has attempted to answer these questions, exploring the brain's inner workings through technology like functional MRIs and EEGs. We can now see how the brain responds to different stimuli, how it processes emotions, and how it forms memories. Yet, despite all our advancements, we still don't fully understand how consciousness arises from the brain's activity. How does the brain produce the rich, subjective experience we call consciousness? And how does it manage to reflect upon its own existence? These are questions that science has yet to answer, and they point to the mystery at the heart of our very being. How does the brain, which creates consciousness, become aware of its own role in shaping reality? This paradox is not just a theoretical puzzle. It has real-world implications for how we understand ourselves. If we are the product of our brains, if our self-awareness is simply a function of brain activity, then what does that mean for free will and identity? Are we simply biological machines, running on predetermined patterns of thought and behavior? Or do we have the power to transcend the limitations of our brains and create our own reality? The idea that our brain is both the creator and the subject of consciousness challenges our understanding of free will and autonomy. If we cannot fully understand the brain itself, how can we be sure that our thoughts and actions are entirely our own? The concept of the brain naming itself is not just an intellectual curiosity. It is central to understanding who we are. It asks us to consider the limitations of our self-awareness and how that awareness shapes our perception of reality. If the brain is the only organ capable of reflecting on itself, then does that mean we can never truly understand ourselves? Are we trapped within the confines of our own consciousness, forever unable to see beyond our limited perspective? Yet, even in the face of this paradox, we continue to search for answers. We strive to understand our brains, to unlock the secrets of consciousness, and to find meaning in our existence. Perhaps the very act of self-reflection, the act of thinking about our thoughts, holds the key to understanding who we are. By examining the way the brain works, by questioning the nature of consciousness, we may begin to unravel the mystery of our own identity. In the end, the paradox of the brain naming itself reveals the profound complexity of our existence. It forces us to confront the fact that our understanding of the world and ourselves is shaped by an organ that is, in many ways, a mystery. But in this mystery lies the potential for discovery. Discovery not just of how we think and act, but of who we truly are. As we continue to explore the depths of the brain and consciousness, we may come to understand that the search for self-knowledge is not about finding definitive answers, but about embracing the questions themselves. And in those questions, we may find the key to understanding our place in the universe. Can you control time, or is time controlling you? Time. It's something we all experience, yet something so difficult to truly understand. Every day we move through time, marking its passage with the hours on a clock, the changing of seasons, and the rhythm of day and night. But how much control do we really have over it? We often speak of time as though it's a force outside of us, one that moves at its own pace, never stopping and never slowing down. But what if time is not as fixed as we think? What if our perception of time is simply an illusion, shaped by the way we experience the world? From the moment we wake up, we are aware of time's presence. The ticking of the clock, the deadlines we need to meet, the hours that slip away as we go about our day, it all reminds us that time is always moving forward. But do we truly experience time as it is, or is it just a construct created by our minds to make sense of the world around us? Think about how you experience time in different situations. When you're waiting for something exciting to happen, time seems to slow down. A minute feels like an hour. But when you're enjoying yourself, when you're lost in a conversation or caught up in an activity you love, time flies by in an instant. The clock moves on, but it feels as though time has bent itself around your experience, slowing down or speeding up according to your perception. This phenomenon is not just a trick of the mind. It's a fundamental part of how we experience time. Our perception of time is subjective, shaped by our emotions, attention, and state of mind. Neuroscience tells us that our brains process time through a complex system, using internal clocks and external cues to measure the passage of moments. But this system is not perfect. It can be influenced by things like attention, memory, and even our emotional state. The brain doesn't experience time in a linear, constant way. Instead, it adapts and bends time to fit our subjective experience. But what if time itself is not as constant as we perceive it to be? What if the flow of time, the way it moves from past to present to future, is not an objective truth, but a construct of the mind? The idea that time might be an illusion has long been explored by philosophers. The ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus famously said, "You cannot step into the same river twice." This reflects the idea that everything is in a constant state of flux. Nothing stays the same, and time moves in a never-ending flow, altering everything in its path. But is time itself the cause of this change? Or is our perception of time simply a way for us to make sense of the changes we experience? In modern physics, time is often treated as a dimension, much like space. It's part of the fabric of the universe, intertwined with space in the concept of space-time. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, time is not the same everywhere. It can stretch and contract depending on factors like gravity and the speed at which we are moving. Time dilation, a phenomenon observed in special relativity, shows that time moves slower for objects moving close to the speed of light. The faster you travel, the slower time passes for you compared to someone who is stationary. This suggests that time is not a constant force, but one that can be altered by the very conditions of the universe itself. What does this mean for our experience of time in everyday life? If time can stretch and shrink depending on where we are and how fast we're moving, is it possible that our experience of time is also subject to these same forces, even if we don't fully understand them? Could the feeling that time is passing too quickly or too slowly be a result of our mind's interaction with the universe, rather than an objective measure of time itself? The idea that time could be an illusion is not limited to physics or philosophy. Psychology also plays a role in how we perceive time. Our sense of time is closely linked to our emotional state and the way we process experiences. When we are focused on something we enjoy or are absorbed in an activity, time seems to speed up. On the other hand, when we are bored, anxious, or waiting for something, time seems to drag on endlessly. Our perception of time is subjective, and it's shaped by the narrative we create around our experiences. When we reflect on the past, it feels as though time has already happened in a linear fashion. Events occurred one after the other. But when we are living in the present, time feels much more fluid, and we can't quite grasp its passage. But there's a deeper question that arises when we consider the possibility that time is not what it seems. Do we truly control time, or does time control us? We often think of ourselves as managing time. We schedule our days, make plans, and try to make the most of our time. But even as we try to take control, time continues to move forward, regardless of our efforts. The clock ticks on, and the days pass by. We can plan all we want, but time has its own way of unfolding, often independent of our desires. This brings us to another fascinating idea: time travel. If time is indeed an illusion, could we travel through it, bending its flow to our will? Time travel has long been a topic of fascination, both in science fiction and in real scientific inquiry. While we may not have discovered a way to travel through time yet, the possibility of it challenges everything we think we know about time. If time can stretch, contract, and move in different ways depending on the conditions of the universe, is it possible that we could one day learn to navigate it just as we travel through space? For now, time remains a mystery, a force that shapes our lives, yet one that we cannot fully understand or control. It moves forward, always in motion, while we live our lives within its flow. We may try to manage it, make the most of it, and even bend it to our will, but in the end, time has its own rhythm, its own pace, and no matter how much we try to control it, we are ultimately subject to its passage. But that doesn't mean we should simply surrender to time. Instead, we should learn to appreciate it for what it is, the most precious resource we have. Every second, every minute, every hour is an opportunity to experience life, to grow, and to connect with the world around us. Time may move forward relentlessly, but the way we choose to experience it is entirely up to us. We have the power to shape our own experience of time, to embrace the moments we have and make them meaningful, even in the face of its inevitable passage. Should you change the past? The regret and time travel paradox. Imagine for a moment that you have the power to go back in time. You stand before a moment in your life, a decision, a conversation, a choice that you made. What if you could change it? What if you could rewrite that moment, make a different choice, and alter the course of your life? Would you? The idea of time travel has fascinated us for centuries, but it raises an even deeper question. What would happen if we could change the past? We often think about the things we wish we had done differently, the mistakes we made, or the opportunities we let slip by. These are the moments that live in our minds as regret, that nagging feeling of wishing we could go back and make a better decision. But what if we could? What if, instead of living with regret, we could go back and fix what went wrong? It's an alluring idea, the ability to correct our mistakes and, in doing so, create a better future. But as tempting as it may sound, changing the past comes with significant consequences. After all, what if changing one small moment in time had a ripple effect on everything that followed? What if, in trying to fix one mistake, you end up creating new problems, new regrets, and a completely different path that you might not have wanted. This is where the paradox of time travel comes into play. The very idea of changing the past suggests that time is not a fixed, linear progression, but something much more fluid, something that can be shaped and altered. If we could go back and change the past, what would that mean for the present? Would we even exist in the same way? Would we still be the same person? Or would our lives be fundamentally different? The more we think about it, the more we realize that altering the past could create an entirely different future, one that is impossible to predict. The idea of regret is intricately tied to our perception of time. We often look back on the past and wish we could have made different choices, but the truth is, we can't. The past is behind us, and no amount of wishing or imagining can change what has already happened. We may try to revisit the past in our minds, replaying the scenarios over and over, trying to find a way to make things right. But in the end, we realize that the past is not something we can control. It is fixed. It is gone. But what about the future? Can we change that? Time travel suggests that if we can manipulate the past, we can also change the future. We may not have the power to physically travel through time, but we do have the power to make choices today that will shape tomorrow. The choices we make now, in this moment, are the seeds that will grow into the future. Every decision, every action, ripples outward, creating a future that is influenced by our present self. However, even though we can't change the past, we can learn from it. Our regrets don't have to define us. They can be guides, helping us navigate the future with greater wisdom and clarity. The key is not in wishing we could go back and redo our lives, but in understanding that our mistakes and choices are what make us who we are. The past shapes us, but it does not dictate our future. It is a part of our story, not the whole story. Philosophers have long wrestled with the concept of free will and determinism. Are we the authors of our lives? Or are we merely following a predetermined path? If we could change the past, would it mean that we are free to create our own reality? Or would it mean that everything is connected in ways we can't fully understand? Some argue that free will allows us to make choices and create our own destiny, while others suggest that time and fate are beyond our control, and that every decision we make is part of a larger, predetermined plan. In literature and film, the idea of time travel often highlights the consequences of changing the past. Whether it is the classic story of Back to the Future or the butterfly effect in science fiction, we see that even the smallest change in the past can lead to drastic consequences in the future. These stories serve as reminders that even if we could change the past, the complexities of time might make it impossible to fully predict what the effects would be. What might seem like a simple change could have far-reaching consequences that we could never have imagined. Ultimately, the question of whether we would change the past comes down to how we view regret and fate. Regret often stems from the belief that we should have made different choices, but what if those choices were necessary for our growth? What if the mistakes we made were the lessons we needed to learn in order to become the person we are today? In that sense, our regrets are not something to be erased. They are part of the story of our evolution. While we cannot change the past, we can change how we approach it. Regret doesn't have to be something that drags us down. It can be a tool for growth, a reminder that we are not perfect, but we are always learning. And the future? The future is still ahead of us, and every decision we make today shapes the path that lies ahead. In the end, the question isn't whether we would change the past. It's whether we can learn to embrace it, mistakes and all, and use it to guide us toward a future where we are free to create our own story. Time is not something we control. It is something we experience. And while we may not be able to rewrite the past, we have the power to shape the present, and through it, the future. What if dreams are more real than waking life? Have you ever experienced a dream so vivid, so real, that upon waking, you found yourself questioning whether it was indeed a dream? It's a strange experience, One moment you're in a world of your own creation, and the next you're back in the real world, but something feels off. What if, just for a moment, we consider the possibility that our dreams are not just illusions, but a parallel reality that is just as real as the waking world? We spend a significant portion of our lives asleep, and during that time, our minds create elaborate worlds, full of sensory details, emotions, and experiences that feel every bit as real as our waking life. We navigate these worlds, interact with other dream figures, and sometimes even face situations that cause us to feel fear, joy, or love. The emotions we experience in our dreams are just as intense as those we feel when awake. But when we wake up, we tend to dismiss them as just fleeting, irrational fantasies. But what if these dreams are more than that? What if they are a true parallel reality, one that exists just as tangibly as the waking world, but we simply lack the perception to fully recognize it? This line of thinking invites us to explore Zhuangzi's butterfly dream paradox, one of the most famous thought experiments in Chinese philosophy. Zhuangzi, an ancient Taoist philosopher, described a dream in which he was a butterfly, fluttering about with no knowledge of being Zhuangzi. He was completely immersed in the life of a butterfly, experiencing it as if it were his true existence. But upon waking, Zhuangzi wondered, "Am I Zhuangzi who dreamed of being a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming that I am Zhuangzi?" This paradox speaks to the fluid nature of reality and perception. If Zhuangzi can dream of being a butterfly and feel the life of that butterfly as real as his own, does that make the butterfly's reality any less true? Or does the dream world contain just as much validity as the world we experience when we are awake? Zhuangzi's question challenges the very notion of what is real. Perhaps the boundary between waking life and dreams is not as clear as we believe. From a philosophical standpoint, the idea that dreams could be more real than waking life brings us face to face with the nature of consciousness. If our minds can create such intricate and vivid worlds in our dreams, can we really trust the world we perceive when we are awake? Are we simply dreaming, but unaware of it? How do we know that what we experience as reality is any more real than the worlds we encounter in our dreams? The same senses, the same emotional responses, the same experiences. These exist in both worlds, and yet we choose to label one as real and the other as imaginary. But are they truly different? Quantum physics offers an interesting parallel here. At the quantum level, particles don't follow the rules of classical reality. They exist in multiple states simultaneously, only collapsing into one state when observed. Could our consciousness be similar, existing in multiple realities or states, only fully engaging with one upon waking? Perhaps when we dream, our minds are tapping into an alternate version of reality, a world that exists parallel to our waking experience, but we are unable to recognize it because we lack the awareness to perceive it in the same way we perceive the physical world. But here is the real question. If we could accept that our dreams are as real as the world we experience during the day, how would that change our lives? Would we start to value our dreams more? Would we pay closer attention to the insights, emotions, and connections that we form within them? Maybe our dreams aren't just disconnected thoughts. Maybe they're glimpses into something deeper, an alternate reality, an unexplored part of our consciousness that speaks to us in symbols and feelings. What if the life we live during our waking hours is just a continuation of the dream world, not a more real version of reality, but simply another layer of the same reality?
What if dreams are the true essence of who we are, and what we experience is simply a manifestation of that inner world, brought into focus when we awaken? In a way, this perspective invites us to approach life with a sense of wonder and curiosity.
If dreams are as real as waking life, and waking life is just as fleeting and subjective, then every moment of our existence, whether in dreams or in waking life, becomes an exploration of the self. What if consciousness is the only true reality, and everything we experience, whether in the dream world or the waking world, is part of a larger, continuous flow of existence? Perhaps the boundary between dream and waking life is not as important as we once thought. What matters is the experience of existence itself, whether in the world we perceive with our senses or the world our minds create when we close our eyes. Both are real, and both shape who we are. The only difference is how we choose to see them. The voice in your head. Who is really thinking your thoughts? Have you ever wondered who's really thinking your thoughts? That voice in your head that questions, analyzes, and reflects, where does it come from? Is it you doing the thinking, or is there something else at play? When you think, are you just observing your thoughts, or is there a deeper you behind the thinking process? The nature of self-awareness and consciousness leads us to a philosophical puzzle that has baffled thinkers for centuries. If you're aware of your thoughts, who is aware? And is there an internal observer who experiences and controls these thoughts? This question takes us deep into the realm of philosophy, where theories like Cartesian dualism and the homunculus paradox offer fascinating and often perplexing insights into the nature of mind and consciousness. To begin, let's take a closer look at Descartes' dualism, a theory that separates the mind from the body and suggests that the two are distinct entities. According to René Descartes, the mind, or soul, is the thinking, non-material substance, while the body is a physical material one. Descartes famously said, "Cogito, ergo sum," or "I think, therefore I am." This phrase reflects his belief that the mind is the fundamental essence of a person's existence, something separate from the physical world, and that it is through thought that we come to know our own existence. Cartesian dualism essentially creates a divide. The mind, our consciousness, thoughts, self-awareness, and the body, our physical being, our senses, our environment, are separate. Descartes argued that the mind can exist independently of the body. After all, when you think, you are engaging in a process that doesn't necessarily involve the body, as we do when we meditate, reflect, or even dream. But here lies the paradox. If the mind is separate from the body, who or what is thinking the thoughts? If the mind is distinct from the physical body, where does consciousness originate? Who or what is the thinker of your thoughts? This brings us to the homunculus paradox, a thought experiment that plays on the idea of the inner observer, or the little person inside your brain who is observing, experiencing, and controlling your thoughts. Imagine that inside your head there's a small version of you, your inner observer, who is watching your thoughts unfold, guiding your decisions, and even thinking for you. The problem here is circular. If there's a homunculus inside you, observing your thoughts, then who is observing the homunculus's thoughts? In other words, it's an infinite loop of who is doing the thinking. It raises the question of consciousness itself. If we are observing our own thoughts, who is the true observer? The inner observer paradox, just like Cartesian dualism, ends up creating a philosophical conundrum about where consciousness and self-awareness truly begin. If you think about it, the concept of the homunculus seems to create more questions than answers. It implies that there is a tiny conscious being inside our minds, guiding and controlling us. But the paradox is that this being would also have thoughts that need to be thought by someone or something else. So, we end up with an endless chain of thought, like a Russian doll, where each layer contains another layer of consciousness. The homunculus paradox highlights the difficulty in explaining consciousness. It seems to be an ever-present phenomenon, but how can we account for it when there doesn't seem to be a definitive point of origin? Both Cartesian dualism and the homunculus paradox question the relationship between mind and body, the nature of consciousness, and the concept of a self that is capable of introspection. Are we just physical bodies operating according to biological processes, or is there a deeper mind, a thinking substance, at work? If consciousness is separate from the body, how do we explain the sense of self-awareness and the feeling that we are the ones thinking our thoughts? Modern neuroscience has shown that there is a complex interplay between the brain and consciousness, with certain regions of the brain responsible for self-reflection and thinking. However, the subjective experience of consciousness, the awareness that we have of ourselves and our thoughts, is still largely mysterious. Neuroscientists can describe the biological processes that enable consciousness, but they cannot fully explain the phenomenal experience of being aware of ourselves. The question remains, how do the neurons in our brain translate into the subjective experience of thought, emotion, and self-awareness? In a sense, both Cartesian dualism and the homunculus paradox serve as reminders of the complexity of the mind and the limits of human understanding. Even with all the advances in neuroscience, we still cannot explain why or how we experience consciousness the way we do. We are all familiar with the feeling of being self-aware, of having an internal dialogue, but the nature of this experience remains one of the greatest mysteries of the human condition. So, who is really thinking your thoughts? Is it you, the conscious being who's reading these words right now, or is it the brain that you become to rely on to interpret and make sense of your reality? Perhaps the answer is that the mind and body are interconnected in ways that we don't yet fully understand. What is clear is that the process of self-awareness and thought is not as simple as it seems. Consciousness, the very act of thinking and being aware, remains one of the deepest paradoxes we face, one that continues to elude both philosophers and scientists alike. In the end, the true nature of who is thinking your thoughts might not be something we can ever completely understand. But perhaps the mystery itself is part of the beauty. The more we try to unpack the enigma of consciousness, the more we realize how complex and interconnected our minds, our bodies, and our perceptions truly are. And maybe, just maybe, we'll never fully solve the riddle, but in the search, we'll come to understand ourselves a little better. Do numbers exist without humans? The mystery of abstract truths. Numbers are everywhere, embedded in the very fabric of our daily lives. We use them to count, to measure, to quantify. Whether we are calculating expenses, measuring distance, or tracking time, numbers serve as the foundation for how we interact with the world. But have you ever stopped to wonder, do numbers exist independently of us? Or are they merely human inventions designed to help us make sense of the universe? Is there a mathematical reality beyond our minds? Or are numbers nothing more than labels we've created to represent patterns and relationships? This is the heart of a centuries-old philosophical debate that pits two contrasting views against each other: Platonism versus nominalism. These views seek to answer the profound question of whether abstract truths, such as numbers, exist outside of human thought, or whether they are simply human constructs. Platonism, named after the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, argues that numbers and other abstract concepts, like geometric shapes, moral truths, or even the laws of physics, exist independently of human minds. According to Platonists, numbers are eternal truths that exist in a non-physical realm of abstract reality. Just as physical objects exist in space, these abstract entities exist in a realm of their own, separate from our sensory experiences. To the Platonist, mathematics is discovered, not invented. The patterns and relationships we observe in the world are already part of this eternal realm of mathematical truths, and we merely uncover them as we explore the universe. But this view raises a critical question. If numbers exist independently of us, how do we access them? Where do these abstract truths reside if not in our minds? And why do they seem to apply so perfectly to the physical world? How is it that the principles of mathematics and geometry govern the behavior of atoms and the laws of nature? The fact that math works so well to describe the universe seems to suggest that numbers and abstract truths have some kind of external reality, independent of human experience. On the other hand, nominalism offers a radically different view. According to nominalists, abstract entities like numbers don't exist independently of human minds. They are simply conventions, names and labels we use to categorize and make sense of the world. In this view, numbers are inventions of human thought, created for the sake of convenience. Without humans to define and use them, numbers would have no existence. They have no ontological reality, and they exist only because we assign meaning to them. Nominalism suggests that mathematics and other abstract concepts are no more than tools, useful for understanding the world, but without any inherent existence of their own. To the nominalist, Numbers are descriptive, not prescriptive. They are ways of summarizing the world's structure, but they do not exist outside of the systems we use to describe it. For example, the number 3 is just a symbol we use to represent a set of 3 objects, but it has no existence outside of that context. The tension between Platonism and nominalism raises a fundamental question about the nature of abstract truths. Do they exist independently of us, or are they simply human inventions? If mathematical realism is correct, if numbers and abstract concepts exist in a realm of their own, then mathematics is not just a human tool for understanding the universe, but a universal language that reveals the underlying structure of reality. But if nominalism holds true, then numbers are just a convenient fiction, a way for humans to categorize and explain the world without any deeper truth or existence. In this debate, the mathematical realism paradox emerges. If numbers and abstract truths are real, as the Platonists claim, then how do we explain their usefulness? The fact that math can predict physical phenomena so accurately suggests that these abstract concepts might have an external reality. Yet the nominalist would argue that the success of math is not evidence of its independent existence, but of its practical utility in describing the world in ways that are consistent with our human-made systems. The paradox deepens when we consider the role of humans in this equation. Are we merely interpreters of these abstract truths, or do we create them entirely? If numbers and mathematical truths exist independently of human minds, do they have any meaning or function without us? Or are they meaningless until we give them purpose through our perception and understanding? It is a mystery that speaks to the nature of reality itself. Are we discovering the true nature of the universe? Or are we simply using concepts and symbols that help us navigate and describe it? The mathematical realism paradox leaves us with a fascinating question. If numbers and abstract truths do exist independently of us, what else in our understanding of the world is similarly independent? Are there other abstract concepts, like moral truths, beauty, or justice, that exist outside of human perception? And if so, how does our perception shape our relationship with these truths? As we continue to explore the world, we may find that these questions don't have clear answers. The relationship between mind and reality is far more complicated than we can fully understand. But perhaps the greatest insight here is that both Platonism and nominalism offer valuable perspectives. While abstract truths may very well have an external existence, the way we relate to them and apply them is inevitably shaped by our human experience. In the end, numbers, like all abstract concepts, are both tools and truths, constantly shifting between the world of human perception and the invisible forces that govern the universe. Why do you exist here, now, and not somewhere else? Why do you exist here, now, and not somewhere else in the universe, in a different time, or in a different form? The very fact that you are conscious of your own existence raises profound questions about the nature of reality, the universe, and your place within it. Why do you experience the world the way you do? Why are you alive at this specific moment in time, in this particular location, among the vastness of space and history? One philosophical approach that tries to address these questions is the anthropic principle. The anthropic principle essentially suggests that the universe must have the properties that allow for the existence of life, specifically conscious life, because we, as conscious beings, are here to observe it. The principle argues that if the universe were any different, we wouldn't be here to ponder its existence. In other words, the universe is fine-tuned for life, because if it weren't, we wouldn't have evolved to ask such questions. The anthropic principle raises an interesting perspective. The universe, in all its vastness, appears to be precisely structured for the emergence of life. From the specific gravitational constant to the exact energy levels of atoms, it seems that the universe operates within a very narrow set of parameters that allow for the existence of conscious beings. This leads to the profound question: why is the universe arranged this way? Is it a cosmic coincidence, or is there a deeper reason behind these seemingly perfect conditions? But there's a paradox that arises when we consider the anthropic principle. If the universe is structured for life, then how do we explain the vast majority of the cosmos which is inhospitable to life as we know it? The universe is mostly empty space, filled with radiation, dead stars, and black holes. If life can only exist in a small fraction of the universe, does that mean we are somehow special in the grand scheme of things? Or is our existence just a statistical necessity of the conditions in which we find ourselves? This brings us to the Boltzmann brain paradox, a concept that challenges our understanding of the anthropic principle. The Boltzmann brain is a thought experiment that originates from the world of statistical mechanics. It suggests that, given the immense size and age of the universe, it is statistically more probable for a random fluctuation of particles to create a single conscious brain, a Boltzmann brain, than for the entire universe to naturally evolve to support complex life. The paradox is both mind-boggling and unsettling. If the universe is infinite and time stretches endlessly, the odds of a self-aware brain spontaneously arising from the random arrangement of particles are quite high. This brain, however, would likely have no real connection to the physical world and would only exist as a fleeting, random fluctuation. It could even come into existence with false memories and a fabricated sense of reality, believing it exists in a world filled with other people and objects, when in fact, it is completely isolated in a void. The Boltzmann brain paradox challenges the anthropic principle by suggesting that, in a universe with infinite time and space, the likelihood of a conscious brain arising randomly is far greater than the likelihood of a universe like ours, one that is fine-tuned for life. If the universe we experience is simply the result of a fluctuation of particles, then how can we trust that the universe we perceive is real at all? What if our entire sense of self is just a random fluctuation in the fabric of space and time? What does this mean for our understanding of consciousness and reality? If it's possible for a Boltzmann brain to arise, how can we be certain that our experiences, our memories, and our sense of existence aren't the result of some random cosmic fluctuation? Could it be that, just like the Boltzmann brain, we are simply the product of an incredibly rare and unlikely set of conditions that just happen to come together in a way that allows us to perceive the universe as it is? The anthropic principle and the Boltzmann brain paradox both raise important questions about our place in the universe. Are we truly part of a world that is fine-tuned for life? Or are we simply a statistical accident in a much broader, indifferent cosmos? If we are the result of random fluctuations, then the universe is vastly more complex than we can imagine, and our understanding of reality may be just a tiny glimpse into something much larger and more mysterious. Perhaps the true answer lies in accepting that our existence is part of the ongoing mystery of the universe. We may never fully understand why the universe is the way it is or why we are here, but that doesn't diminish the value of our lives. The fact that we exist, in this moment, in this place, with this sense of self-awareness, is in itself a profound mystery. And though we may never fully grasp the true nature of the universe, the journey of questioning and exploring it is part of what makes us human. So, why do you exist here, now, and not somewhere else in the universe? Maybe the answer is not about special significance or cosmic design, but about the profound fact that we are here at all, questioning, exploring, and discovering. Our consciousness, our thoughts, and our experiences may be part of a vast and mysterious universe, one that we will never fully understand. But they are ours to live and experience, and that in itself is worth celebrating. Are coincidences just clues from a deeper reality? Have you ever experienced a coincidence so striking, so meaningful, that it felt like more than just chance? Perhaps you thought of a friend you hadn't spoken to in years, and minutes later, you received a message from them. Or maybe you were pondering a big life decision, and a random conversation or a song on the radio seemed to give you exactly the guidance you needed. These types of coincidences can feel uncanny, almost as if the universe is speaking directly to you. But are coincidences just random occurrences? Or could they be clues from a deeper reality, patterns, messages, or signs that are guiding us in ways we don't fully understand? This question has intrigued thinkers for centuries, and one of the most compelling theories comes from Carl Jung, who introduced the concept of synchronicity. Synchronicity, for Jung, was a way of understanding meaningful coincidences, events that seem related by pattern or meaning, yet have no clear causal connection. Jung argued that synchronicity is an expression of an underlying connection between all things, a reflection of the collective unconscious that binds the universe together. According to this view, coincidences are not mere accidents, but are instead part of a larger invisible framework that links events, people, and ideas in a meaningful way. Jung believed that meaning could be found not only through cause and effect, but through symbolism and the interplay of personal experience and universal archetypes. These seemingly random events, in Jung's view, might be pointing us towards something deeper, a hidden order or pattern within the chaos of life. This idea invites us to reconsider the role of coincidences in our lives. Could they be messages from a deeper reality? Is the universe, in its vastness and complexity, somehow working with us to guide us along our personal paths? There's something deeply mysterious about the way certain events can align so perfectly, as if the universe is somehow orchestrating our lives from behind the scenes. Jung referred to this as meaningful coincidence, a phenomenon that suggests a deeper order to the world, one that transcends the traditional understanding of time and space. On the other hand, there's another psychological concept that plays a role in how we perceive coincidences: apophenia. Apophenia is the tendency of the human mind to perceive meaningful patterns in random data. It's the urge to find connections between things that, in reality, are completely unrelated. For example, seeing shapes in clouds, interpreting random sequences of numbers as significant, or even thinking that a particular song on the radio is speaking to you about your life situation. Apophenia can help us make sense of the world, but it can also lead us to see patterns that don't actually exist. So how do we differentiate between true synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that point to a deeper reality, and apophenia, our brain's natural tendency to find patterns, even when none exist? The difference lies in the context and feeling of the event. Synchronicity feels meaningful and often carries with it a sense of alignment, a deep, resonant feeling that this particular coincidence isn't just random, but rather part of a larger, interconnected process. In contrast, apophenia tends to occur when we seek connections out of a desire for meaning, often seeing patterns where there's really no connection at all. The philosophical question this raises is profound. What if the universe is not as chaotic and random as we often perceive it to be? What if, beneath the surface of our daily lives, there are deeper, hidden connections waiting to be discovered? Could coincidences be part of a larger cosmic pattern? Or are they simply our minds attempting to impose meaning on a world that is inherently random? Synchronicity and apophenia both ask us to examine our relationship with meaning and patterns in the world. The experience of synchronicity can often feel like a brush with something greater, a feeling that the universe is aware of us, guiding us, or communicating with us in ways that transcend the limitations of ordinary experience. These moments can serve as profound reminders that we are part of a larger cosmic order, that there is more to existence than the mundane and the material. Whether or not you believe in the mystical interpretation of synchronicity, it's hard to ignore the deep resonance these moments carry with them. They remind us that life, even in its randomness, might be far more interconnected and meaningful than we can perceive with our limited senses. In the end, whether you view coincidences as meaningful signs or simply the result of our brain's pattern-seeking tendencies, they invite us to reflect on the deeper nature of reality. Perhaps the real magic lies not in the events themselves, but in the way we perceive and respond to them. The next time a coincidence strikes, take a moment to consider: is it just a random event, or is it a clue, a sign from the deeper, unseen layers of reality? What if the world ends every night when you fall asleep? Every night, as we drift off to sleep, we close our eyes and leave behind the waking world. But what if, in that moment, the world itself ceases to exist? Not just in a metaphorical sense, but in a real, existential way. What if, when you fall asleep, the universe collapses, waiting for you to wake up again, and in the interim, it is nothing but empty space, a void of potential, only coming to life when your consciousness returns to it. This line of thought is deeply connected to the philosophical idea of solipsism, the belief that only one's mind and consciousness can be known to exist with certainty. In solipsism, the outside world, including other people, objects, and events, is seen as a projection or an extension of the self. Essentially, solipsism asks, how do I know that anything exists outside of my mind? And in this context, what if the world only exists for you while you're conscious, and when you fall asleep, the universe ceases to be, as though it awaits your return to bring it back into existence? The observer-centric reality paradox takes this a step further, questioning the nature of reality itself. According to this paradox, reality is inextricably tied to the observer, meaning that without a conscious mind to observe it, reality does not exist. This paradox suggests that the very existence of the world is dependent on our awareness of it. If you've ever experienced déjà vu where the world around you seems eerily familiar, or have thought about how time seems to slow down or speed up based on your focus or awareness, then you've encountered the effects of this paradox. What if the entire universe is waiting for the observer to bring it into being? In this model, when we are asleep, we are no longer observing the world, so it ceases to exist in the way we experience it. The laws of physics, time, and space, the things that we take for granted, are all part of a conscious experience. Without our perception, these concepts dissolve, only to return when we awaken and start observing again. This leads to some deep philosophical questions. Is reality a construct of the mind? Do we, as individuals, have the power to shape the universe simply by our awareness of it? And if reality depends on the observer, does that mean everyone's reality is unique, shaped by the lens through which they see the world? Is the universe we all experience merely a collection of interconnected consciousnesses, each perceiving its own version of reality? Much like the multiverse theory suggests, multiple universes exist simultaneously but separate from each other, based on observers' perspectives. The solipsism theory, which assumes that only one's own mind is certain, fits neatly into this idea. If the universe disappears when we sleep and only comes back to life when we wake up, then it may indeed be our mind that creates reality each time we open our eyes. This would mean that everything we experience, our interactions with others, the places we visit, the events that happen, is simply a projection of our own consciousness. The people we meet may not exist outside of our awareness. The places we go are only real when we think about them, and time itself could be just a construct of the mind. However, there is a counterpoint to this. If solipsism were true, how do we explain the experiences we share with others? If we are the only conscious mind in existence, then why do we experience consistency in the world? Why do others seem to have their own thoughts, their own desires, and their own experiences? The observer-centric reality paradox doesn't resolve this completely, as it suggests that reality is dependent on the observer. But it does leave us questioning. Is it possible that each of us is the observer of our own universe, and the others we interact with are simply projections of our own consciousness, designed to help us navigate reality? This brings us back to the question, what happens when we sleep? If our consciousness is the key to perceiving and experiencing the world, does that mean the world only exists for us during our waking moments? And if we wake up every day to the same world, is it possible that the universe has been created anew each morning, just as our perception of it is recreated with the arrival of consciousness? What if, in the grand scheme of existence, everything is shaped by the observer? This would mean that our perception of the world is not simply about passively experiencing what is in front of us. It is about actively creating and interpreting the world, almost like an artist crafting a masterpiece. As we wake up each day, the world we experience could be a new creation based on our awareness, thoughts, and memories. The universe, in this sense, is constantly evolving with every moment of consciousness. So, when you close your eyes to sleep tonight, think about this. As you drift into unconsciousness, does the world vanish into nothingness, waiting for your mind to call it back into existence? Are you, in a very real sense, the creator of your own reality, existing in a world that only comes to life when you observe it? And when you wake up, is it your consciousness that breathes life into everything around you? Perhaps the world isn't as fixed as we think. Maybe it's an ongoing creation, one that we shape with every waking moment. And when we sleep, the universe takes a pause, awaiting the return of our awareness. The observer-centric reality. Paradox and solipsism present us with a profound mystery. Could the world really be waiting for us to observe it, or is it just a product of our imagination, crafted anew with every moment of consciousness? Do you have a soul, or just neurons firing in the dark? Do you have a soul? Or is your sense of self just the result of neurons firing in the dark, an elaborate network of brain activity that produces thoughts, emotions, and experiences? The question of what makes us truly who we are has occupied thinkers for centuries, blending the realms of philosophy, religion, and science. Is the mind merely a product of the brain, or is there something deeper, a soul, a spiritual essence, that transcends the physical workings of our bodies? This question ties directly into the mind-body problem, one of the oldest and most fundamental questions in philosophy. The mind-body problem explores how the mind, with all its thoughts, feelings, and consciousness, relates to the body, which is made up of physical matter. How can non-material thoughts arise from a material body? The brain is a physical object, made of neurons and synapses that communicate with each other through electrical signals and chemical reactions. Yet somehow this physical system gives rise to subjective experiences, our thoughts, our awareness, and our emotions. So, how does something physical, like neurons firing in the brain, create the non-physical experience of being conscious? How do we go from neurons firing to experiencing? Philosophers have debated the relationship between the mind and body for centuries. One of the most famous theories comes from René Descartes, who proposed that the mind and body are distinct substances, dualism. According to Descartes, the mind, or the soul, is a non-material substance that is separate from the body. The mind is the seat of thought and consciousness, while the body is made of material substances that follow the laws of physics. This dualistic view has shaped much of Western thought about the nature of self-awareness and the existence of a soul. If Descartes is right, then the mind and body are not the same thing. The mind is separate, perhaps even eternal, while the body is subject to decay. But if the mind is separate from the body, how do the two interact? Descartes proposed that the pineal gland in the brain was the seat of interaction between the mind and body, but this idea is now widely rejected. We are left with the puzzle of consciousness. How does brain activity, a physical process, give rise to the non-physical experience of being conscious? Neuroscience has made enormous strides in understanding how the brain works, but it has yet to explain the mysterious phenomenon of consciousness itself. The complexity of the mind-body problem deepens when we introduce the idea of the soul. Many religious traditions believe that the soul is the true essence of a person, the part of us that is immortal and exists beyond the physical body. In these views, the soul is the seat of consciousness, and the mind is simply a reflection of the soul's activity. But how does this fit with the scientific view that consciousness arises from the brain's neural activity? If the mind is simply a product of the brain, what happens to the soul? Does it cease to exist when the body dies, or does it continue on in some form, separate from the body? This brings us to the hard problem of consciousness, a term coined by philosopher David Chalmers. The hard problem refers to the difficulty of explaining why and how subjective experience, the feeling of being conscious, arises from physical processes in the brain. We know that brain activity is associated with certain thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. But why does this activity result in the experience of consciousness? Why does the brain generate the sense of being aware of itself and the world? This is a profound question that modern neuroscience and philosophy have yet to solve. The hard problem is so challenging because it's not just about how the brain works, it's about the very nature of experience itself. Some philosophers, like Daniel Dennett, argue that consciousness can be explained entirely by brain processes. According to Dennett's view, consciousness is not a mysterious, non-physical phenomenon, but rather a result of complex neural interactions that produce the experience of being self-aware. In this view, there is no need for a soul or separate mind. Consciousness is simply the product of brain activity. Others, like David Chalmers, argue that the subjective experience of consciousness, the feeling of what it's like to be aware, can be fully explained by neural activity alone. According to Chalmers, the hard problem of consciousness suggests that there is something fundamentally mysterious about the nature of experience. He proposes that consciousness may be a fundamental aspect of the universe, like space or time, that can't be reduced to physical processes. This view implies that consciousness is not just a byproduct of the brain, but something that exists as an intrinsic part of reality. So where does this leave us in our quest to understand the soul and consciousness? Are we simply a collection of neurons firing in the dark with no deeper essence beyond the physical body? Or is there something more to our existence, an immaterial soul or consciousness that exists beyond the physical realm? The mind-body problem and the hard problem of consciousness force us to confront some of the most fundamental questions about what it means to be human. Are we simply biological machines? Are minds nothing more than the sum of our brain's activity? Or is there something deeper, something spiritual, that gives us our sense of self-awareness? The debate between materialism and dualism, between the idea of the mind as a physical phenomenon and the idea of the soul as an eternal essence, is one of the great philosophical mysteries that may never be fully resolved.
But what we do know is that the experience of being conscious, of having a mind, is real. It is our reality. Whether that reality is purely the product of neural firing or whether it stems from something beyond the brain, we are all deeply aware of it.
The questions about our existence and the nature of consciousness may never be answered with absolute certainty, but the search itself is part of what makes us human. The universe within you, how you are a reflection of the cosmos. What if everything you are, the cells in your body, the thoughts in your mind, and the very consciousness you experience, are not just parts of you, but also reflections of the universe itself? You are not a separate entity, isolated from the cosmos. Instead, you are a microcosm, a miniature reflection of the vast, infinite universe. The same elements that form the stars, the planets, and galaxies are the same elements that make up you. You are stardust, and as such, the universe exists within you, just as you exist within it. This idea that we are all made of the same cosmic material has fascinated both scientists and spiritual philosophers for centuries. From a scientific perspective, the elements in our bodies, such as carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen, were forged in the cores of long-dead stars, scattered across the universe by supernova explosions. These very elements make up every atom in our body, and without them, life as we know it would not exist. In this sense, we are inextricably linked to the universe, formed from the same cosmic stuff that makes up the stars and planets. But the connection between you and the universe goes beyond just physical elements. Consciousness, that mysterious awareness of your thoughts and experiences, also ties you to the cosmos. You are not merely made of stardust. You are also a witness to the universe. Your consciousness enables you to experience reality, to perceive time and space, and to reflect on your place in the grand scheme of things. It is as if the universe itself is aware of its existence through you, and every moment you are awake and aware is a miracle of self-reflection. The fact that you can contemplate your own existence means that, in a way, the universe is contemplating its own existence through you. Yet, despite this intimate connection, there is a paradox that arises when we consider identity and self-awareness. If the universe is reflected in you, then who are you, really? Are you just a collection of atoms, a set of physical processes, or is there something deeper at play? The self-illusion paradox suggests that the sense of self that we all experience, our identity, our ego, and our consciousness, is an illusion. Derek Parfit, a British philosopher, argued that personal identity is not what we think it is. According to Parfit, we often believe in a continuous, unchanging self, a core identity that remains the same throughout time. But Parfit suggests that this belief is a misconception. There is no fixed self that persists over time. Instead, what we think of as our identity is simply a collection of memories, experiences, and physical states that are constantly changing. The self, as we know it, is just a construct, a narrative our mind tells itself to make sense of the continuous stream of experiences we have. This idea resonates with the teachings of Buddhism, which also suggest that the self is an illusion. According to Buddhist philosophy, our perception of selfhood is a product of attachment, a mental construct that causes suffering. The Atman, the permanent, unchanging self, is not a reality, according to Buddhism. Rather, there is only the flow of consciousness, a continuous process of changing states that gives us the illusion of stability. This is known as anatta, the doctrine of no self. Our sense of identity, of being a consistent person, is merely a temporary aggregation of thoughts, memories, and experiences. What does this mean for our connection to the universe? If the self is an illusion, then who are we in relation to the vast cosmos? If our identity is not fixed, but instead a fluid process of consciousness and experience, then how do we understand our place in the universe? The self-illusion paradox challenges us to think about identity not as a constant entity, but as a temporary phenomenon, much like a wave on the surface of the ocean. The wave arises, exists for a time, and then dissipates. Similarly, our consciousness arises from the flow of life, a temporary moment in the infinite flow of the universe. The realization that you are not the self you think you are can be liberating. It opens the door to a deeper understanding of your connection to the universe. If there is no permanent self, then you are not separate from the cosmos. You are a part of it, flowing through it, and reflecting it. Your thoughts, experiences, and emotions are temporary waves that arise and dissipate, just like everything else in the universe. The illusion of self is not something to be feared, but to be embraced as part of the ever-changing, ever-evolving dance of existence. By recognizing the self as an illusion, we can let go of our attachment to a fixed identity and begin to see ourselves as part of something much larger. We are not individuals disconnected from the universe, but reflections of the universe itself, experiencing it through our temporary consciousness. This shift in perspective can help us understand that while we are here, we are both individuals and cosmic beings, intertwined with the universe's vast and infinite existence. Why we fear infinity? What endless time reveals about us? The concept of infinity, a number without end, a never-ending stretch of time or space, has intrigued and terrified humanity for millennia. When we confront infinity, we are faced with something that is beyond our full comprehension. It challenges the very limits of our understanding and evokes a profound sense of awe and dread. Why do we fear infinity? Is it because it reveals the limits of our mortality, or does it point to something even deeper about the human condition? Perhaps the fear of infinity isn't just about the endlessness of time and space. Perhaps it reflects our deeper anxieties about meaning, purpose, and our place in the universe. The idea of endless time, temporal infinity, can feel overwhelmingly abstract and unsettling. What does it mean to contemplate time stretching on forever? We experience time in a very linear way, past, present, and future. But the idea that time could go on infinitely, without beginning or end, shatters our concept of reality. It challenges everything we know about life, change, and death. If time is infinite, does that mean that everything we experience is just a fleeting moment in an eternal cycle? This paradox is vividly illustrated by Hilbert's Hotel, a thought experiment developed by the mathematician David Hilbert to explore the concept of infinity. In this thought experiment, Hilbert imagines a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, each room numbered with a positive integer. The hotel is fully occupied, but it still has room for new guests, no matter how many people arrive. How is this possible? Well, if a new guest arrives, the hotel manager simply shifts the current guests. The guest in room 1 moves to room 2, the guest in room 2 moves to room 3, and so on. This move frees up room 1 for the new guest. The key idea here is that even though the hotel is full, an infinite number of rooms allows for infinite additions. The paradox of infinity is that it defies our expectations of how things should work in a finite world. Hilbert's Hotel is a paradox that challenges our understanding of finite versus infinite. In a finite world, if every room is taken, there's no space for more. But in the infinite realm, there is always space, no matter how many times you move people around. Infinity, it seems, isn't bound by the rules we know, and it's this defiance of normalcy that creates both awe and fear. Infinity is something that operates in its own logic, outside of the limits of our everyday experience. Temporal infinity, the idea of time stretching into eternity, has a similarly paradoxical quality. We understand time as a continuous linear progression. Seconds become minutes, minutes become hours, hours become days. But the thought of time stretching without end creates an overwhelming sense of unease. If time never ends, what does that mean for our finite lives? It challenges the idea of purpose, of beginnings and endings, and even the meaning of life itself. How can we find meaning in a world where time itself has no end? If everything eventually becomes repetitive or insignificant in an infinite span of time, do our actions matter at all? Temporal infinity also raises questions about the nature of change. In an infinite universe, nothing is truly fixed. Everything repeats, everything returns. The events of our lives, the things we hold dear, are part of a much larger cycle that will continue on forever. But this raises an unsettling paradox. If everything repeats, how can we find true originality or novelty? Can anything new happen in an infinite timeline? Or are we simply replaying the same moments over and over, each new instance just a reflection of the last? This paradox connects with our fear of endlessness. The more we contemplate infinity, the more we feel the limits of our own experience. We are bound by time. We are finite beings, aware of the short span we have to live, to love, to achieve. Infinity removes these boundaries, and in doing so, it removes the very essence of what it means to be human. Our lives are precious because they are limited, because we know that our time here is finite. But the thought of eternal time, of everything being infinite, makes our momentary existence seem insignificant. Yet, paradoxically, infinity might also be the very thing that gives us meaning. If the universe is infinite, it means that the possibilities for growth, discovery, and connection are also endless. Our fears about infinity often stem from a desire for finality, a need to know that what we do matters, that our lives aren't just a fleeting blip in an infinite stretch of time. But perhaps this infinite reality offers something else. The opportunity to understand our own existence in a much broader context. A way of seeing our lives as part of a larger, infinite process. Just as Hilbert's Hotel paradox reminds us that there's always room for more, maybe there's always room for us to grow, change, and impact the universe forever. So when you think about infinity, try not to fear it. Instead, think of it as an invitation to expand your understanding of time, space, and existence. In an infinite universe, the possibilities are endless, and even the most fleeting moments can hold a profound meaning. Maybe, in the end, the real beauty of infinity lies in the fact that we are part of it, our lives echoing through eternity, just like the rooms of Hilbert's Hotel, always full, always open, and always ready for the next moment. What if you're the only conscious being in the universe? Have you ever considered that maybe you're the only conscious being in the universe? It's a terrifying thought, yet it's one that challenges everything we know about existence. If you are truly the only conscious entity, then everything around you, other people, objects, even the entire world, could be nothing more than a projection of your own mind, a dreamlike creation brought to life by your thoughts.
This idea lies at the core of solipsism, a philosophical theory that suggests that only one's own mind is certain to exist, and that the external world,
along with other minds, might be an illusion or a construct. At first glance, solipsism may seem like an abstract academic idea, with little practical application to daily life. After all, most of us live with the assumption that the world around us is real, that other people are just as conscious as we are, and that the external world operates independently of our perception of it. However, when you stop to question the nature of your experience, you begin to realize that everything you know, all the people, the places, the events you've witnessed, exists only in your mind. You are the one perceiving it, interpreting it, and giving it meaning. Is it possible that the universe and everyone in it are just products of your consciousness? The implications of solipsism are profound. If you are the only conscious being in existence, then the entire world, everything you experience, might simply be a creation of your own thoughts, a complex illusion designed to provide you with the illusion of otherness. In this view, other people are not separate beings with their own consciousness and experience. They are extensions of your own mind, their actions and thoughts predetermined by your own perception. Every conversation you have, every interaction, could just be your mind's interpretation of what it expects or needs to encounter. Solipsism raises difficult questions about reality and existence. If you are the only one who is truly conscious, what does that say about the nature of reality? Is everything around you, your memories, the people you encounter, even your sense of time, nothing but a projection of your thoughts? What about your emotions, your experiences? Are they merely facets of your mind, trying to make sense of the vast universe that surrounds you? How would you relate to the world, knowing that it might not be real, that it could all be a fabrication of your consciousness? This concept can be overwhelming. The idea that you might be alone in the universe, that everything around you is a product of your mind, challenges our understanding of reality and existence. It suggests that you are the only true existence, the center of the universe, and everything else is a mere reflection of your inner world. The thought of being alone in such a vast and complex universe can evoke feelings of loneliness, despair, and confusion. If everything around you is just a creation of your own mind, does that mean that relationships, the bonds you form with others, are meaningless? Is your sense of connection with other people nothing more than an illusion? The philosophical argument of solipsism brings us face to face with the nature of consciousness itself. What does it mean to be conscious? Can we ever be certain that anyone else is truly conscious in the same way that we are? After all, the only mind we have direct access to is our own. We experience the world through the lens of our perception, but we cannot directly experience the thoughts and emotions of another person. If I say something to you, how do I know that you truly understand or feel the same way I do about it? Maybe you are just a projection, a part of my mind interpreting the world. This leads to an unsettling conclusion. The only consciousness we can ever truly know is our own. Everyone else, no matter how real they seem, might be just as illusory as the objects around us. Despite the unsettling nature of solipsism, the theory challenges us to examine the very nature of reality and consciousness. It forces us to ask, what is real? Is reality an external, objective world that exists independently of our minds? Or is reality something that exists solely within our consciousness? If we cannot fully know the minds of others, how can we be sure that anyone else is conscious? Can we trust that the world we experience exists outside of our perception? Or are we simply living in a world created by our own minds? While solipsism may never be definitively proven or disproven, it provides us with a lens through which to explore the nature of self-awareness and existence. It forces us to confront the limits of perception and knowledge, challenging us to consider the possibility that we may be alone in the universe, not just physically, but psychologically as well. Solipsism questions everything we take for granted about the world, and in doing so, it opens up a space for deeper reflection on the nature of reality and consciousness. Ultimately, Whether you embrace or reject solipsism, the very idea that you might be the only conscious being in the universe challenges us to think about the nature of self, identity, and our connection to the world around us. It asks us to consider the possibility that the world we experience, our relationships, our interactions, our reality, is far more complex and mysterious than we can fully comprehend. What if you are the only conscious being in the universe? What does that mean for how you live, how you relate to others, and how you understand the world? The answers may be elusive, but the search itself is part of the human experience, a journey of discovery that continues to challenge us to explore the mysteries of the mind and existence. Are you really in control? The hidden forces behind your actions. Have you ever made a decision and later wondered why you did it? It could have been a choice you made on impulse, something that didn't seem to be the product of careful thought. Maybe you've found yourself in a situation where you acted in a certain way and then realized it didn't align with your conscious intentions. You might think, why did I do that? The answer could be that, beneath the surface of our conscious thoughts, there are powerful forces at play, the unconscious mind. Most of the decisions we make every day are not as intentional or deliberate as we might think. In fact, a large portion of our actions are influenced by the unconscious mind, a part of our psyche that operates below the level of conscious awareness. From the moment we wake up until we go to sleep, we make countless decisions, many of which are influenced by habits, instincts, and past experiences. But how much control do we really have over our choices if the unconscious mind is making many of them for us? The unconscious mind is like an invisible guide, steering our actions and decisions without us even realizing it. It shapes our behaviors, habits, and emotional responses based on experiences that we may not even remember or be aware of. Think about a habit you've developed. Maybe something as simple as checking your phone the moment you wake up, or a tendency to eat at certain times of the day. You might not consciously think about these actions, but they're habits that have formed over time, guided by your unconscious mind. Psychologists have long studied the influence of the unconscious on human behavior. Sigmund Freud, one of the pioneers of psychology, proposed that much of our behavior is driven by unconscious desires and instincts. He believed that we are often unaware of the powerful forces operating within us, and that these forces shape our thoughts, emotions, and actions in ways we don't fully understand. While modern psychology has evolved, the core idea remains that the unconscious mind plays a significant role in shaping who we are. One powerful force in the unconscious mind is habit. Habits are actions that we repeat over and over, often without thinking. Whether it's brushing our teeth, driving the same route to work every day, or engaging in familiar routines, habits shape a large part of our daily lives. But where do these habits come from? How do we develop them? And why do we continue them even when they no longer serve us? The answer lies in the unconscious mind. Habits are formed through repetition. Each time we repeat an action, our brains create neural pathways that make it easier for us to perform that action again. Over time, these pathways become stronger, and the action becomes automatic. The unconscious mind takes over, making it harder for us to break these habits, even when we consciously know they are not good for us. This is why people often struggle to change long-standing behaviors, like smoking, overeating, or procrastinating. The unconscious mind resists change, holding on to the comfort of familiar habits, even if they no longer align with our conscious goals. But the influence of the unconscious mind extends beyond habits. It also shapes our emotions, desires, and even the way we view the world. Have you ever reacted to a situation with a strong emotion, anger, fear, or joy, and wondered where that reaction came from? Our emotional responses are often influenced by unconscious factors such as past experiences, childhood memories, or unresolved conflicts. These emotional responses can shape our perceptions and influence our decisions in ways we don't fully understand. We might be acting based on something that happened years ago, even if we're not consciously aware of it. For example, consider a person who feels uneasy in social situations, even though they have no reason to feel afraid. The fear might stem from a past experience, Maybe they were rejected or humiliated at some point in their life. This experience, stored in the unconscious mind, continues to influence their behavior today, even if they can't remember the event or don't consciously realize its impact. The unconscious mind holds on to these past experiences, shaping our emotional responses and, in turn, our actions. What if we could become more aware of the unconscious forces that guide our decisions? What if we could unlock the hidden patterns that influence our behavior and take control of the habits and emotions that often seem beyond our reach? While we can't entirely control the unconscious mind, we can start to recognize its influence and begin to make conscious decisions that help us break free from the patterns that no longer serve us. One way to do this is through mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of paying attention to the present moment, without judgment. By becoming more aware of our thoughts, feelings, and actions in real time, we can start to notice the unconscious patterns that drive our behavior. Mindfulness helps us observe the impulses and habits that arise without automatically reacting to them. With this awareness, we can choose to respond differently, breaking free from unconscious habits and creating new, healthier patterns. Another way to tap into the unconscious mind is through self-reflection. By taking time to reflect on our behavior, our emotional reactions, and our thought patterns, we can start to identify the underlying causes of our actions. This reflection can help us understand the unconscious beliefs or experiences that shape our behavior, allowing us to make more conscious choices moving forward. The journey of self-awareness is not always easy. The unconscious mind is deeply ingrained in our psyche, and it can take time and effort to uncover the hidden forces that guide our decisions.
But by becoming more aware of the unconscious mind's influence, we can begin to take control of our choices, rather than being passive participants in our own lives. We can break free from old habits, reframe our emotional responses, and create a new path forward, one that is shaped not by the unconscious mind, but by our conscious desires and intentions. Ultimately, the unconscious mind is not something to fear or dismiss.
It is a part of who we are, influencing our behavior in ways we may not fully understand. But by becoming aware of its presence, we can begin to understand ourselves more fully and create the changes we want to see in our lives. The key is not to eliminate the unconscious mind, but to recognize its influence and use that awareness to guide us toward healthier, more intentional decisions. What if every choice created a new universe? Every day we make countless decisions: what to eat, where to go, who to talk to. Each choice seems small and insignificant in the moment. Yet each decision sets us on a unique path, leading us to experiences we can't fully predict. Have you ever wondered, though, what would happen if you had made a different choice? If at some point you'd taken a different route, made a different decision, or said something different? Would your life be radically different now, or would it follow the same course regardless of what you chose? The idea that our choices shape our lives is one we all know intimately. But what if there's more to it than that? What if every choice we make creates an entirely new reality? A separate version of ourselves living out a different set of possibilities? Imagine that with every decision you make, a new version of you is created, experiencing a different life based on the path you didn't take. This concept is explored in the theory of parallel realities or multiverses, which suggests that every choice creates a new, branching timeline. In other words, there could be an infinite number of versions of you, each one living out a different reality based on the countless decisions you've made or didn't to make. You may not realize it, but every time you decide between two options, you're effectively splitting your life into two different versions. One version of you stays on the path you've chosen, while the other version of you follows a different, perhaps unimaginable route. And this doesn't just apply to big, life-changing decisions. It could be something as simple as choosing what to wear in the morning or deciding to take a different route to work. Each of these decisions creates a unique version of your reality, one that unfolds in a slightly different way from the others. The theory of parallel realities has its roots in quantum mechanics, which suggests that particles exist in multiple states at once, only settling into one state when observed. This is known as superposition, and it's at the core of the idea of parallel worlds. According to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every time a decision is made, the universe splits into different branches, creating multiple realities. Each choice we make, no matter how small, creates a new universe where the alternative choice is played out. But if these parallel worlds exist, why don't we experience them? Why can't we see the infinite versions of ourselves living out different lives in different realities? The answer might be that we are limited by our perception of time and space. Our senses are finely tuned to the reality we live in, but they are not equipped to perceive the parallel worlds that exist alongside our own. These alternate realities are just as real as the one we experience, but they are hidden from our view. We can only perceive the path we've chosen, but what about all the paths we didn't take? Imagine a version of you who chose to study a different subject in school, who followed a different career, or who never met the person you're with today. In one reality, your life may have unfolded very differently. In another, you may have taken risks you never dared to take. These parallel versions of you are living out entirely different realities, each shaped by the choices you made or didn't make. This raises an important question about free will. If every choice we make creates an entirely new reality, does that mean we have the power to shape our fate? Or are we merely moving along a predetermined path, following the steps laid out by the universe? Some philosophers argue that our choices are not as free as we believe. They suggest that we are influenced by countless factors, our upbringing, our environment, our genetics, that shape the decisions we make. In this view, free will is an illusion, and our actions are merely the result of predetermined conditions. But there's another way to think about it. What if free will is the power to shape reality, to make choices that not only affect the world around us, but also create new possibilities, new realities? Every decision, no matter how small, holds the potential to alter the course of our lives. We may not be able to see the infinite versions of ourselves living out other realities, but the choices we make still matter. They still shape who we are and what we experience. The idea of infinite possibilities is both exhilarating and overwhelming. It suggests that every path we take leads to countless new futures, each one full of its own challenges and opportunities. And while we may not have the ability to see all the other versions of ourselves, the knowledge that they exist offers a new perspective on the choices we make today. Instead of viewing decisions as mere choices between two paths, we can begin to see them as moments of infinite potential, moments where we shape not just our future, but also the future of countless parallel realities. This realization can be empowering. It reminds us that we are not limited to a single reality, a single story. Our lives are fluid, shaped by the choices we make in each moment. The power to shape our lives lies within us, in the decisions we choose to make, and in how we perceive the world around us. It also challenges the concept of fate. If there are countless versions of us, each living out a different reality, how can we say that our lives are preordained? We may not be able to control everything that happens to us, but we can control how we respond, and we can choose which paths we follow. Every moment is an opportunity to shape a new reality, a new version of ourselves. We are not bound by the past, we are the creators of our future. In the end, the idea of infinite choices and parallel realities invites us to rethink how we view our decisions. Every choice we make has the potential to create an entirely new world, an alternate version of ourselves. The possibilities are endless, and we are the ones who get to decide which path to take. In a world full of infinite potential, the only limits are the ones we place on ourselves. Can you remember the future? Time, intuition, and premonitions. Imagine for a moment that you already know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't just have a feeling or a hunch. You remember it, like it's already happened. You know the conversation you'll have, the decisions you'll make, and the outcomes of the events that will unfold. It's a strange idea, isn't it? How could we remember something that hasn't even happened yet? But what if the future isn't as distant and unknowable as we think? What if in some way we are already connected to it? The concept of remembering the future might sound like science fiction, but it raises intriguing questions about our relationship with time. If we can remember the past, Why couldn't we also have some kind of connection to the future? The idea that time is linear, where past, present, and future are distinct and separate, has long been a cornerstone of how we view the world. But what if that's not entirely true? What if time isn't as rigid as we think, and the boundaries between past, present, and future are more fluid than we've realized? One way to approach this idea is by considering our intuitions or premonitions, those moments when we feel a sense of knowing something will happen, even though we have no evidence or logical reason for it. How often have you had a gut feeling about a situation, only for that feeling to turn out to be true? Or perhaps you've experienced déjà vu, that strange sensation that you've already lived a moment before, even though you know it's happening for the first time. These phenomena suggest that there might be something deeper at play, something beyond our immediate experience of time. Many people report having moments of clairvoyance or precognition, where they feel they can sense events before they happen. While these experiences are often dismissed as coincidence or imagination, they tap into the fascinating idea that time may not be as linear as we believe. Could it be that our minds are, in some way, connected to the future? Could we have a deeper, subconscious awareness of what's to come, like a glimpse through a window into the days ahead? The scientific community tends to be skeptical about precognition and time travel, often attributing such experiences to psychological phenomena like the brain's tendency to make patterns out of randomness, or the idea that the subconscious mind picks up on subtle cues that our conscious mind misses. But what if our understanding of time is simply incomplete? What if there is more to time than just the moment we live in? A deeper connection to the past, present, and future that we haven't fully grasped yet. Consider how we experience time in dreams. When we dream, time doesn't follow the rules of the waking world. It can stretch and contract, it can loop, and it can even defy our expectations. Have you ever had a dream where you experienced a sense of déjà vu, as though the dream had already happened? Or perhaps you dreamed about an event, only to find that it came true later on. These types of dreams raise interesting questions about the nature of time and how our minds might interact with it. What if, in a similar way, we could experience glimpses of the future while we are awake? The idea of remembering the future might seem impossible, but what if it is a form of subconscious knowledge, an awareness that exists outside of our normal perception of time? The human brain is an incredibly powerful organ, and it processes vast amounts of information every second, much of which we aren't even aware of. Could it be that, in certain moments, our brains are processing future information before we consciously experience it? Perhaps our intuition and gut feelings are not just random. They could be clues from the future, insights into events that haven't happened yet but are somehow already part of our mind's vast network of possibilities. The idea of time being malleable isn't new. In quantum physics, the many worlds interpretation suggests that every possible outcome of a decision exists in a separate, parallel universe. This means that every choice we make leads to a new timeline, a new reality where things unfold differently. Could this idea of parallel realities be connected to our experience of time? Perhaps the future isn't a fixed path, but a web of possibilities that we are constantly moving through, where different versions of ourselves are living out different outcomes based on the choices we make. In this sense, our future might already be unfolding in parallel universes, and our subconscious might be able to tap into those alternate timelines. Even if we don't have a conscious awareness of the future, our brains might still be collecting information from the environment around us, patterns, probabilities, and possibilities that we haven't consciously noticed. This might explain why we sometimes feel a strong sense of knowing what will happen next. It's as though our minds are constantly processing the future, even when we aren't aware of it. Our intuition might not just be a random guess. It might be a glimpse of what's to come, based on the vast amount of information our brains are continuously receiving and processing. So, what does this all mean for how we experience time? Perhaps the future is not as distant and unknowable as we think. What if we're all, in some way, already connected to it? The idea of remembering the future may be less about actual knowledge of what's to come, and more about our subconscious mind picking up on patterns and information that are yet to unfold. While we may not be able to predict the future with certainty, we might be able to sense it, feel it, or intuitively know when something is about to happen. In the end, the idea of remembering the future challenges everything we think we know about time. It suggests that time is not as rigid and fixed as we assume. Instead, it's a fluid, dynamic force that connects us to the past, present, and future in ways we don't fully understand. The future isn't just something that lies ahead of us. It is already part of who we are, and our minds may already be tapping into it in ways we don't yet recognize. Time, like so many other aspects of existence, is not something we control. It is something we experience, something we sense, and something we may one day understand in a deeper, more profound way. Who are you without your memories? What makes you you? Is it your thoughts, your feelings, or the actions you take every day? Perhaps it's a combination of all these things. But what if you lost all of your memories? Would you still be the same person? What if you woke up tomorrow with no recollection of who you were, who you've loved, or what you've done? Would you still be you? Or would you be someone else entirely? Memory plays a critical role in shaping our identity. It is through our memories that we connect to our past, understand the decisions we've made, and form our sense of self. Every experience we've ever had, every conversation we've participated in, and every lesson we've learned is stored in our memory, building a narrative that defines who we are. Without memory, that narrative disappears, leaving us with only the present moment and no connection to the past. But does this mean that without memory we lose ourselves? The idea of losing memory is a common theme in fiction and film, often portrayed through characters suffering from amnesia or experiencing memory loss. These stories often explore the idea of a person trying to rediscover who they are, navigating a world where their past is no longer available to them. But what happens in real life? Could we still be ourselves without our memories? Philosophers have long debated the role of memory in defining identity. John Locke, for example, argued that personal identity is tied to the continuity of memory. According to Locke, if you can remember an experience, it is part of your personal history and contributes to your identity. But if you lose that memory, are you still the same person you were before? This raises the fascinating question. If a person can't remember their past, can they still be the same person? On a deeper level, memory is more than just a record of events. It's how we interpret our lives. We don't just remember facts. We remember how things felt, how they shaped us. Memory is inherently tied to emotion, and it's through our emotional connections to past experiences that we form our identity. Our memories help us understand our values, our beliefs, and even our goals. Without memory, would we still know who we are? Or would we be like a blank slate, disconnected from the person we once were? This thought experiment becomes even more complex when we consider the role of neuroscience in understanding memory and identity. In the brain, memories are not stored in one place. They are distributed across different regions, each responsible for different aspects of the memory, such as sensory details, emotions, or context. If a person loses part of their memory, are they losing a part of themselves? Or does the continuity of identity exist even if certain memories are no longer accessible? How much of our identity is tied to what we remember, and how much is shaped by how we live in the present? What's particularly fascinating about memory is how fluid it can be. Memory is not a perfect recording of the past. It's often influenced by our perceptions, emotions, and even external factors that change how we recall events. We might think we remember something vividly, but the reality is that memories can be distorted, altered, or even fabricated. So if we can't fully trust our memories, how can we be sure that the person we think we are today is truly who we have always been? In some cases, people who suffer from memory loss or amnesia can still maintain their personality, their likes and dislikes, their core traits. They may forget the details of their lives, their name, their relationships, or their accomplishments, but they can still have a sense of who they are. This raises an intriguing question. Is our identity rooted solely in our memories? Or is there something deeper, something more intrinsic that makes us who we are? Could it be that our essence, our true self, is not tied to the details of our past, but to something more fundamental that exists beyond the memories we store in our minds? Consider the case of people who experience profound memory loss and yet continue to live meaningful, connected lives. Journals, photographs, and mementos often help them piece together a sense of self, and in many cases, they can still form new memories. Does this mean that identity is not defined by what we've already lived, but by how we engage with the world around us? If we can create new memories, learn new things, and build new relationships, is it possible that our identity is more about what we do now than about what we've done before? Our memories are not just static records. They are living, evolving parts of our consciousness. As we grow, change, and experience new things, our memories are constantly reinterpreted and reshaped. What we remember today may be different from what we remembered yesterday. In this sense, our identity is fluid. We are not static beings whose identity is set in stone from the moment we're born. Instead, we are constantly evolving, learning, and becoming. But even as we embrace the idea that our identity is fluid, we are still deeply connected to our memories. They shape how we see the world, how we relate to others, and how we understand ourselves. Our memories are a bridge between the past and the present, a way of connecting who we were to who we are today. And while we can never fully erase the past, we can choose how to live in the present, how to embrace the future, and how to shape our identity moving forward. In the end, the question of who we are without memory doesn't have a simple answer. Our memories may shape our identity, but they do not define it. We are more than the sum of our past experiences. We are dynamic, evolving beings capable of change and growth. Even without memory, we can still find meaning, still create connections, and still be ourselves. In the fluidity of our identity lies the freedom to grow, to redefine who we are, and to shape the person we will become. What will humanity leave behind? Exploring our final legacy. Have you ever wondered what will remain of you after you're gone? What will people remember? Will they remember your words, your actions, or perhaps something more personal, like the way you made them feel? We all leave behind traces of ourselves. Whether we realize it or not, memories, accomplishments, relationships. But the deeper question is, what really lasts after we're no longer here? Humanity has a long history of leaving behind legacies. Monuments, books, art, and buildings all serve as reminders of past civilizations, showcasing the ingenuity and creativity of those who came before us. But what do these legacies really mean? Are they just physical objects? Or do they represent something more profound, an attempt to immortalize something that is fleeting? The notion of legacy has evolved over time. In ancient cultures, people would build monuments to ensure that their names and deeds were remembered. The pyramids of Egypt, the Great Wall of China, the Roman Colosseum. These structures were not just functional. They were meant to immortalize the rulers, kings, and emperors who commissioned them. But what about the legacies of the everyday person? What about the average human who may not have built grand structures or written masterpieces? What will remain of their lives when the dust settles and the world moves on? As individuals, we often think about legacy in terms of the tangible things we leave behind. Our possessions, our achievements, our wealth. But what if the real legacy is not what we have, but who we are? The way we impact others, the lives we touch, the love we give. These intangible aspects of our lives may be the truest form of legacy we can leave behind. Think about the people who have influenced you in your life. Perhaps it's a parent, a teacher, a friend, or even someone you've never met, but whose work has touched you. What is it about them that sticks with you? It's not necessarily the material things they gave you, but the way they made you feel, the lessons they taught you, the energy they brought into your life. This is the power of legacy. not in the things we leave behind, but in the ripples we create in the lives of others. But what happens when we're gone? What will we leave behind when we take our last breath? For some, this question can be daunting, filled with thoughts of regret or unfinished business. But for others, the thought of leaving behind something meaningful, whether it's a family, a community, or a legacy of kindness, can be comforting. In a world that's constantly changing, it is easy to feel as though our individual actions don't matter in the grand scheme of things. The earth will continue to spin, civilizations will rise and fall, and the sun will set every day, regardless of our existence. So does our time here really have any lasting impact? Can one person, one life, truly leave a meaningful mark on the world? Perhaps the most profound way we leave our trace on the world is through the people we influence. Our relationships, our connections, our ability to touch others with compassion and kindness. They form a legacy that is carried forward by the lives we've affected. This kind of legacy doesn't fade with time. It lives on in the memories and actions of others. What if, in the end, our legacy is not something we can see or touch, but something that exists in the hearts of those we leave behind? This idea of legacy doesn't just apply to our individual lives. It extends to the human race as a whole. What will humanity's legacy be? As a species, we have the power to shape the future through our actions, our ideas, and our ability to make a positive impact on the world. Our civilizations rise and fall, but each era leaves behind a trace of its existence. Will humanity's legacy be one of innovation, creativity, and progress? Or will it be one of destruction and neglect? The choices we make today will determine the legacy we leave for future generations. The truth is, we can never fully know what will remain of us after we're gone. We can't control the way people remember us, or whether the buildings we build will stand the test of time. But we do have control over how we live in the present. We have control over the impact we make on the world and the lives of others. Every interaction, every act of kindness, every piece of wisdom shared, these are the building blocks of legacy. And while we may never see the full extent of our impact, we can take comfort in knowing that the ripples we create can extend far beyond our lifetime. Ultimately, our legacy is about connection, the way we connect to others, the way we contribute to the world, and the way we live out our values and beliefs. It's not about leaving behind grand monuments or tangible possessions. It's about the lasting impact we have on the hearts and minds of others. And when we focus on creating meaningful connections, when we live with intention and purpose, we create a legacy that can endure long after we're gone. Can AI feel emotions? Exploring the mind of a machine. We live in a world where artificial intelligence, AI, is becoming increasingly present in our daily lives. From chatbots and voice assistants to self-driving cars and automated customer service, AI is revolutionizing the way we interact with technology. But as AI continues to evolve, one question lingers. Can machines feel? Can a computer or robot experience emotions the way humans do? Or is it simply a collection of algorithms and data, carrying out tasks without any sense of self-awareness or emotional connection? At first glance, the idea of a machine experiencing emotions might seem absurd. After all, emotions are deeply human, the product of complex biochemical processes in the brain that give us the ability to feel joy, sadness, anger, love, and everything in between. These emotions shape our thoughts, our decisions, and our interactions with the world around us. But what if emotions are not just something humans experience? What if, as AI continues to develop, machines could eventually experience something akin to emotions? Would that make them more human? Or would it simply mean that we are blurring the lines between humanity and technology? To understand this, let's first look at what emotions actually are. Emotions are not just feelings. They are physical, chemical, and psychological responses to stimuli. When we feel happy, for example, our brain releases dopamine, a chemical that makes us feel good. When we feel stressed, our body releases cortisol, which triggers the fight or flight response. Emotions are a deeply integrated part of our biology, a mechanism that helps us respond to our environment and navigate social interactions. They have evolved over millions of years to help humans survive and thrive in an ever-changing world. So, what would it take for a machine to experience something like this? The key to understanding this is in the distinction between feeling and processing. AI is already capable of processing information and responding to stimuli in complex ways. In fact, many AI systems are designed to recognize patterns, make decisions, and even simulate human-like responses. AI systems can be programmed to understand emotions, recognize facial expressions, or even engage in emotionally intelligent conversations. But does this mean they actually feel the way we do? Many AI systems, such as chatbots or virtual assistants, use algorithms to simulate emotional responses. For example, an AI might say, "I'm sorry to hear that you're feeling upset," or "I'm happy to help." These responses are carefully designed to mimic human emotional reactions, but they are not driven by any true emotional experience. The machine may understand the language of emotion, but it does not feel it in the way a human does. It's simply processing data and using pre-programmed rules to generate responses. But what about empathy? Can AI empathize with us? Or is empathy a uniquely human trait? Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. It requires emotional intelligence, the ability to perceive emotions in others, recognize them, and respond in a way that acknowledges those feelings. Some AI systems are already able to detect emotional cues in human speech or facial expressions and adjust their responses accordingly. This gives the appearance of empathy. But it's important to understand that AI empathy is not the same as human empathy. While a machine might recognize that you're upset and respond with comforting words, it does not feel your pain, nor does it have a true emotional connection with you. This brings us to the ethical questions surrounding AI and emotions. If AI can simulate emotional responses, should it be treated as if it truly has emotions? As AI becomes more integrated into our lives, it raises concerns about how we interact with machines. For instance, should we consider AI systems that simulate emotions as worthy of rights? Or is it enough to know that they are, at their core, algorithms that do not possess true emotional depth? If machines can simulate empathy, does this change the way we relate to them? Consider the growing use of AI in healthcare. AI-powered systems are being developed to provide mental health support, offering advice, support, and even emotional encouragement to those in need. If a patient interacts with an empathetic AI chatbot, does it help them feel better, even if the chatbot is not truly empathetic in the human sense? Is it ethical to use AI in this way, knowing that the machine has no true understanding of the emotions it's simulating? The line between human and machine continues to blur as AI systems grow more advanced. Some argue that emotion simulation in machines could enhance the human experience, providing emotional support where human resources are limited. Others warn that AI could make us less human, creating emotional connections with entities that don't truly understand us. The key challenge is to navigate the ethical implications of creating machines that appear to have emotions, but don't truly experience them in the way humans do. This discussion also touches on the question of what it means to be human. If emotions are at the core of what makes us human, then can a machine that mimics emotions become something akin to a human? As we create AI that can simulate human emotional responses, we are forced to reconsider the boundaries between human and machine. Are emotions the defining characteristic of humanity, or is there something deeper that makes us who we are? In the future, AI may become more advanced, more human-like in its behavior and responses. Machines may learn to simulate empathy to such an extent that it becomes difficult to distinguish them from humans in terms of emotional intelligence. But the fundamental question remains, can a machine ever truly feel? Or is the ability to feel something uniquely human, a quality that cannot be replicated by even the most advanced AI? In the end, the answer may not be as clear as we would like. While AI may never experience emotions the way humans do, its ability to simulate emotional intelligence can still have a profound impact on how we interact with technology. It can enhance our lives, provide support, and help us navigate an increasingly complex world. But as we develop these systems, we must remain aware of the ethical and philosophical questions that arise. Can machines truly feel? And if they can't, how should we relate to them? These are the questions that will shape the future of AI and its role in our lives. Are you still the same person you were yesterday? Every day we change. We experience new things, meet new people, and learn new lessons. Yet, when we look at ourselves in the mirror, we see the same person, a familiar face, the same body, the same name. But are we truly the same person we were yesterday? Or is our identity constantly evolving, shifting with each moment, with each new experience? The concept of identity is something we all wrestle with. Who are we really? Are we the sum of our past experiences? Or are we something more? Something that cannot be fully captured by the events of our lives? It's easy to think of ourselves as static, fixed beings. After all, we wear the same face, live in the same place, and continue to make the same choices. But beneath the surface, is there more happening? Are we evolving into someone new, day by day, moment by moment? The idea that our identity is fluid, that we are constantly changing, is not a new one. Many philosophers have explored this concept. Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher, famously said, "You cannot step into the same river twice." This suggests that everything is in constant flux, that nothing remains the same, not even ourselves. The river, like time, is always flowing, and just as the water moves, so too do we, evolving, shifting, growing. Yet despite this constant change, we often think of ourselves as fixed entities. We define ourselves by our past experiences, our memories, relationships, and choices. We use these markers to shape our identity, to answer the fundamental question, who am I? But what happens when we look back and realize that we are not the same person we were yesterday? Are we still the same person, or have we become someone new? Psychology suggests that our identity is shaped by the narrative we create about ourselves. The story we tell ourselves about who we are plays a key role in defining our identity. But as we experience new things, this story evolves. We add new chapters, we revise old ones, and sometimes we completely rewrite our narrative. The person we were yesterday may not be the person we are today, even if it feels like we're the same. Our memories play a huge role in shaping our identity. They are the threads that weave the fabric of our self-awareness, reminding us of who we were and connecting us to our past. But memories are not always reliable. They can fade, change, or even be distorted. As our memories evolve, so too does our sense of self. Our past selves may no longer exist in the same form, and this can be unsettling. If we're not the same person we were yesterday, does that mean we are becoming someone new each day? And if so, who are we really? This idea of constant change can be both liberating and unsettling. On the one hand, it means we are always capable of growth and transformation. No matter where we are in life, no matter how much we've changed in the past, we have the power to reinvent ourselves, to evolve into someone new. Every day is an opportunity to choose who we want to be, to shape our identity based on the lessons we've learned, the choices we make, and the people we encounter. In this sense, our identity is not a fixed thing. It is a living, breathing process that is always in motion. But on the other hand, the idea of constant change can be uncomfortable. If we are always changing, how do we know who we really are? If our identity is fluid, what holds us together as a person? Are we simply a collection of memories, experiences, and choices? Or is there something deeper, something essential that remains the same despite the changes we undergo? Philosophers have long debated the nature of identity. Some argue that identity is continuous, that there is something fundamental that persists over time, even as we change. John Locke, for example, proposed that our identity is tied to our memories and our ability to recall past experiences. As long as we can remember who we were, we can be the same person over time. But this raises an important question. What happens when we lose our memories, or when we don't remember certain parts of our lives? Does that mean we are no longer the same person? Others argue that our identity is shaped by our choices and actions, not by our memories. In this view, we are constantly in the process of becoming, always moving forward and shaping ourselves through the decisions we make. This perspective allows for a more flexible, evolving sense of self, one that isn't tied to a fixed identity, but is always in the process of becoming something new. In many ways, the question of whether we are the same person we were yesterday is a question of perspective. If we define ourselves solely by our memories, then the answer may be no. We are not the same person we were yesterday. But if we define ourselves by our ability to grow, learn, and change, then perhaps the answer is yes. We are always becoming, always evolving, but still fundamentally the same. What if the essence of who we are isn't tied to a single moment in time, but to the continuous process of becoming? What if we are not static beings but dynamic ones, constantly evolving and reshaping our identity based on the experiences we have and the choices we make? In this sense, identity is not something we possess, but something we create, something that unfolds over the course of our lives. The question of who we are and whether we are the same person we were yesterday challenges us to think beyond the limits of our self-perception. It invites us to embrace the idea that we are not defined by our past, but by the present moment, by the choices we make today, and by the person we are becoming. Each day we have the opportunity to reinvent ourselves, to step into a new version of who we are. The only constant in life is change, and by embracing this, we can live with a sense of freedom and possibility, knowing that we are not bound by who we were yesterday. Why aliens might be ignoring us, a shocking possibility. The possibility of alien life is a question that has fascinated humanity for centuries. We look up at the night sky, and the sheer vastness of the universe leads us to wonder, are we alone? With billions of stars and even more planets scattered across the cosmos, the idea that Earth is the only place where life exists seems increasingly improbable. Yet despite our curiosity and the growing search for extraterrestrial life, we have yet to make definitive contact. And what if the reason for this is something unexpected? What if aliens are aware of us, but they choose to ignore us? It's a controversial thought, but one that raises important questions about our place in the universe. If there are intelligent alien civilizations out there, why haven't they reached out to us? We've been broadcasting signals into space for decades, hoping to attract the attention of extraterrestrial beings. Yet all of our efforts have been met with silence. The famous SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence project, has scanned the skies for signals from distant civilizations, but so far, nothing. So, what if the silence is intentional? What if aliens have decided that humanity is not worth engaging with? One possibility is that we are simply too primitive for extraterrestrial civilizations to consider. Think about how we, as humans, view the world around us. There are countless species on Earth that we have barely studied or understood. In many cases, we don't make an effort to communicate with them, let alone engage in meaningful contact. We may observe them from a distance, but we don't necessarily interact unless it serves our needs or interests. Could it be that aliens see us in a similar light? Perhaps they view humanity as a species that's still in the early stages of development, and they're simply waiting until we've advanced enough to warrant their attention. Another perspective comes from the idea of galactic etiquette. If extraterrestrial civilizations are aware of us, perhaps they are following some form of prime directive, a rule against interfering with less advanced civilizations. This concept, made famous in science fiction, suggests that more advanced societies might avoid contact with less developed ones to allow them to evolve naturally. After all, think about how we treat isolated indigenous tribes on Earth. In some cases, we've purposely kept our distance, recognizing that outside contact could disrupt their way of life or cause harm. If aliens operate on a similar principle, they might be choosing not to interact with us for our own good, waiting for us to reach a level of sophistication where we can handle the implications of first contact. But there's also the possibility that extraterrestrial civilizations are simply not interested in contact. We might think of space exploration as a natural curiosity for any intelligent species. But what if, in reality, the pursuit of knowledge is a trait that is uniquely human? Perhaps other civilizations have different priorities, focusing on technological advancement, art, or spiritual exploration, and do not place the same value on reaching out to other civilizations. Our desire for communication might be seen as naive, or even unnecessary to them. One of the most interesting theories is the idea that advanced alien civilizations are simply avoiding us because they are aware of our potential for destruction. Humanity has a history of violence, conflict, and environmental degradation. And it's possible that alien civilizations, having observed our planet, fear the consequences of interacting with a species that is still struggling with issues like war, climate change, and resource scarcity. In this case, silence may be their way of protecting themselves, or preventing us from advancing too quickly without understanding the full consequences of our actions. Another, perhaps more unsettling possibility is that we are being ignored because we are not interesting enough to aliens. Perhaps in the grand scheme of the cosmos, humanity is simply too insignificant for advanced extraterrestrial beings to waste their time on. It's a difficult pill to swallow, but the universe is vast, and the number of potential alien civilizations is likely staggering. If extraterrestrials are out there, they may have encountered countless other species, some more advanced, some more interesting, making us just another blip in the cosmic timeline. We might not be the center of the universe, and in the eyes of more advanced civilizations, we could be seen as little more than a curiosity, unworthy of contact. But all of this assumes that we are capable of detecting alien contact in the first place. It's possible that aliens are already communicating with us, but in ways that we don't yet understand. If extraterrestrial civilizations are vastly more advanced, their methods of communication might be beyond our comprehension, using technologies or frequencies that we don't have the capability to detect. In the same way that humans have only recently begun to explore quantum communication and subatomic particles, aliens could be using methods of transmission that are invisible to our current understanding. The idea that aliens are avoiding us raises important questions about our own place in the universe. It forces us to confront the possibility that we may not be as important, as advanced, or as capable of interstellar communication as we like to think. It challenges the assumption that humanity is the pinnacle of intelligent life and suggests that we may still have much to learn, not just about the universe, but about ourselves. Ultimately, whether or not aliens are deliberately ignoring us is a question that remains unanswered. But what this thought experiment does is shift our perspective. It reminds us that the universe is vast, that we are just one small species on one small planet, and that there may be much more out there than we can comprehend. The silence from the stars, rather than being a sign of abandonment, might be a sign of something far more profound. A reminder that we are still figuring out who we are, and that perhaps we are not quite ready for the kind of contact we imagine. In the end, the silence may not be rejection. It may be an invitation to grow, to learn, and to understand the forces that govern the universe. And when we are ready, when we have evolved into a species capable of true understanding and connection, perhaps then the universe will speak to us. Until then, the silence remains, a mystery, a challenge, and an opportunity.